Gotta put Bruce's back.
Could I ask committee to please take their seats? Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the Electoral Area Services Committee. My name is Ian Morris, and I'll be your chair today. And just like to, before we get started, acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the traditional unceded territory of the Coast Salish people. And before you, you have an agenda that was published, but just in advance of that, we have had a request to add a delegation to the agenda, and I have discussed this with the individual, and it's in regards to the transit report, I believe, of R6, and this would require unanimous consent of the committee for this to proceed. So could I have a motion to include this as moved by Director Marcotte, seconded by Director Kuhn? Remind the committee that this would need to be a unanimous consent. It's a delegation that wishes to speak to R6. Okay. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is defeated. I would encourage the individual that wanted to speak that there will be an opportunity under the public input section of the meeting. With that, we have an agenda that has been published. I don't believe we have any new business items, so could I have a motion to adopt the agenda as published? Moved by Director Marcotte, seconded by Director Acton. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion carries. To the minutes of our May 2nd meeting. Moved by Director Davis, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion? Business arising or discussion of the minutes? Director Nicholson.
Could you refresh my memory about the delegation that came from the Cowichan River Neighborhood Association about the Cowichan Fish and Game? Was there supposed to be were staff asked to come back with a report on that, or?
That's a very good question. Turn to staff. Mr. Blackwell.
I would have to verify the tape to ascertain specifically what resolution there might have been at the end of that discussion.
Okay, staff will check on that for you.
Thanks.
Any further discussion of the minutes? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes, Mr. Blackwell?
There's no business arising.
Thank you. Next item, number 4, public input period. The information around the procedure for public input is on the screen, and I would invite anyone that would like to provide some input to this committee on items on the agenda, please come forward, and you have 3 minutes. You need to press the button, turn the mic on.
There we go. Good afternoon, Chairman and fellow Commission members and so on. Don't think I need to introduce myself. David Colson. I'm the owner of the property adjacent to the transit hub facility that's being proposed. Taxpayer in the CVRD and Area E for the last almost 30 years, and for what it's worth, a member of the CVRD APC for the last 15 plus years. So got a bit of background on this project and the area. As I say, we went through a process of rezoning our property right next door to the one in question to create a mixed use, I think it's called a comprehensive community development zone, and it includes an affordable housing component, which we're highly short of in the region, and we've identified the properties on both sides of us to also be future housing opportunities and perhaps affordable housing opportunities. Whether we put that connotation on it or not is beside the point. Through that process, I donated about a 10,000, almost equivalent to a city lot or a large city lot of my property to provide a walking pathway to bring all these areas of housing down and terminating at Bow Road. You've seen the plans and so on. that would put this pathway basically right at the proposed entry to this proposed transit hub. And generally, well, first, I just don't see it working. I see it congested. I see it being dangerous. I've even got my grandson here in the back row who's going to be here. His dad's going to maybe have a minute if I leave him a minute to talk. And I got a small granddaughter that walked down Bull Road every day. The pathway, great idea, guys. But 2.5 meter wide buses passing on a road that's only half of its designated width due to the existing creek is not it's not going to work. This will be brought out in more detail by one of my tenants, Teresa Emery here. She's got a very detailed report showing all the measurements and so on, how this just simply doesn't work. Short and sweet, if we proposed a Polkey Road entrance, which still works for the flow for the bus transit hub off Polkey, which is a traditionally more industrial width street than what's left of Bull, it would mean we'd be eliminating 2 crossings of the Bull Road Creek, because they're already removing one. My time running out there, Ian?
25 seconds.
25 seconds. So quick and dirty, build one proper entry off of Polkey. It eliminates 2 turns. A lot of the buses are going to come off of Roberts Road anyway, so just go back to the drawing board briefly, and I think we'll have a project that works, a nice continuous pathway that takes us right through Chester, over the highway, the only footbridge in Mid-Island, and gives us service at all our new pubs and grocery stores and markets and stuff for this housing development we got. So that's all I'm going to say, and I think I'd like Teresa to maybe come up next. How'd I do?
Thank you. Your time's up, and I would invite
Write that down.
anyone else that would like to provide some input.
I have copies of this package for all the directors since I missed the Wednesday deadline. Except for my notes. Do not take my notes. Right. So just quick, this is where I live, which is on the Cook's Isla side of things. My name is Teresa Emery, and I own a Maclay Heritage Guest House business. I lease the property from Coulson. I'm not here to argue against the proposed use because I suspect that's futile, but I would really like to see the applicants take the neighboring community into consideration and to make some reasonable adjustments that bring it more in line with the official community plan from Area E that promotes the Bull Road corridor as a pedestrian-friendly access. The first picture that I was going to show you was a picture of our house, which I just held up for you. We're just entering our 3rd year of business, and I'm quite passionate about sharing this lovely heritage home with guests and groups for gatherings. Certainly one of the things that attracts people is how it looks. The second slide that I have is a view from our kitchen to gate, and you can really see that it's really isn't that far. And the gate is exactly that's the point where the buses are going to enter and exit onto Bull Road. If I said bus noise, I am sure every single one of you can imagine what that sounds like, a bus stopping and a bus starting. It's actually twice as loud as having a freeway at 50 feet away from your home. So it gives you a little bit of perspective on, it's like at 85 decibels versus 70, which is a freeway at 50 feet. The house was designated heritage by the CVRD just a few years ago. And all of the 4th slide, I'm trying to show with the rays, all of our bedrooms are on the north and the east side. That's exactly that noise point that's going to come off of Bull Road if we stay with the Bull Road access. There's supposed to be red stars on there. The red star, 2 of them on Bull Road, those are showing those stop and start points. There would be 2 of those as opposed to a single stop and start bus noise coming off of Polkey Road. Some people mentioned that coastal environmental was kind of noisy. It was very intermittent. This is whereas BC Transit is before 5 a.m. they get started, and after 11 o'clock at night they're bringing the buses home, which is exactly when people are trying to get to sleep, stay to sleep.
Teresa, you've got 30 seconds.
Okay. And then I guess part of the package we've got page 203, 211, and 210 how are we going to preserve the stream, add a pathway, widen the road, add trees that vary between 10 and 70 meters high? So I think that's all I've got. I've shown some pictures of my car, how to demonstrate how narrow the road is. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to provide some input to the committee?
Hello, my name is Eugene Christian and I'm a tenant on the UEP David Colson's property. So I have issues about that situation when the future development for new property, it have access for the buses. So we have a road, Bowl Road, which is like a 500, 600 feet long, not more, and it's already served like a 3-4 businesses. So we have on the Porky Road on the corner an SB window and doors. Next to our property, the neighbors, it's GS Plumbing Company, which it have around 10, 12 cars, trucks, vans, and cars going out there every morning and in the middle of the day. The window company, it have same amount of cars, like 10, 12, but maybe twice or 3 times per week, they have a big, humongous trucks bringing in windows, doors, taken in or delivered to somewhere. So, plus our business, David Colson Design, we have a workshop there. We have like a maybe amount of like a 6, 8 cars sometimes. We have offices there. So that 500, 600 600 feet long road, it's already served for like a 40 cars in an average days. So if a new situation with the buses, like you say, around maybe 20, coming in, coming out there, that road, it will die. So not just us will have a problem, like David say about the kids' danger, but also the new bus hub, it will have a problem. They have a delay. Because sometimes I wait in the morning when they have a big trucks parking there, like I'm talking about like 40 long trucks with windows and doors. I'm waiting like a 5-10 minutes just for them to move out to big. Maybe you see the plans, the road, it's not very big. It's very tight. So just this I want to present and take into consideration because it will be difficult for us, but also it will be difficult for the new business. So the Porky Road access, it will be very easy because the buses can come in and can come out directly on the highway. It's immediately adjust to the highway, the road there. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Eugene. Would anyone else like to provide some input?
Good afternoon.
You can pull that down if you'd like. There you
Good afternoon. My name is Polly Burke, and I've lived on David's property for 5 years. It's a beautiful place. It's organic gardens. We've got fruit trees and grapevines, and I'd hate to see all that get covered with dust and carbon monoxide and everything else. There's an alternative to this using Bowles Road, and I would like to see that happen. We have a kids' park there that doesn't need to have dust settled on it and so on. That's all I've got to say. I don't want to see it. Thank you.
Appreciate your input. Thank you. Would anyone else like to provide some input? We've got a few minutes left in the public input session.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. My name is Michael Wilson. I'm a homeowner and taxpayer, Area C, Cobble Hill. Reference to agenda items 6C1 and 6C4, I'd like to offer sincere thanks on a personal basis and on behalf of a large number of friends, neighbours and colleagues to Director Sierra, Area B, Shawnigan Lake, and Director Laurie, Area D, Cowichan Bay, for their generous offers of grant and aid contributions to South Cowichan seniors to support the purchase of a defibrillator for the Cobble Hill Hall. These contributions will go a long way towards the overall cost of this vital equipment, and it will be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would ask again, does anyone else want to provide some input to the committee? Seeing no one rushing up to the lectern, we'll move on to the next item. We have no delegations, and we are now to correspondence. I'll turn to Mr. Blackwell, starting with C1, Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake, in the amount of $500 be provided to the South Cowichan seniors to support the purchase of a defibrillator for the Cobble Hill Hall.
Moved by Director Clement, moved by Director Acton, seconded by Director Clement. Is there any discussion on the matter? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion carries. C2, Mr. Blackwell.
The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant
To add to that, on a sad note, we had one of our founding members, Dr. Bill Austin, passed away just recently, and he is the one that has promoted our low tide day and all of the nature center and all of that. So I just wanted to send my condolences to his family and recognize that he was one of the initial supporters of this, which has been very valuable to our community.
Thank you, Director Yanni DiNardo. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And those opposed? The motion carries. C3, Mr. Blackwell.
The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay, in the amount of $500 be provided to Francis Kelsey Secondary School Dry Grad Committee to support the 2018 Dry Grad celebration.
Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Nicholson. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? That motion carries. C4, Mr. Blackwell.
The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay, in the amount of $300 be provided to South Cowichan seniors to support the purchase of a defibrillator for the Cowichan Cobble Hill Hall.
Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Clement. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion carries. C5, Mr. Blackwell.
The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area E, Cowichan Station, Sutton Glenora, in the amount of $100 be provided to Francis Kelsey Secondary School Dry Grad Committee to support the 2018 Dry Grad celebration.
Moved by Director Nicholson, seconded by Director Clement. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? The motion carries. Before we get to C6, could you please amend the amount in this resolution, Mr. Blackwell, from $1,800 to $2,300? And Finance has already provided staff with the authorization that the funds are available. So with that, C6, Mr. Blackwell, with the amended amount.
Thank you. As amended, the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area F, Cowichan Lake South, Scotts Falls, in the amount of $2,300 be provided to Honeymoon Bay Volunteer Firefighters Association to support fundraising efforts for the purchase of automatic electronic defibrillators.
Moved by Director Davis, seconded by Director Clement. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries. Next item is number 7 on the agenda, number of information items. Are there any questions in regards to those items 1 through 7? Seeing none, we'll move to reports, and I'd like to alter the order and call forward staff for R11. We've got a couple of individuals in the audience that shouldn't need to stay for the whole agenda, so I'm going to call forward, is it Mr. Hatami? Would you please give us a brief description of this report?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of this report is to update the committee on the gravel management in Sutton Creek and suggest an interim solution moving forward. Historically, Sutton Creek has been logged by different companies, and they used actually old techniques. As a result, the upper portion of the watershed is not stable, and the gravel deposition into the creek has become an ongoing issue and problem. Staff are recommending that the CVRD apply for a gravel removal permit, and the CVRD partners with the Sutton Creek community to implement the gravel removal under a contract for services agreement and a long-term sediment management strategy to be developed in partnership with the landowners.
Thank you very much. Mr. Blackwell, would you please read the resolution before us? R11.
I did.
Oh, you did? Okay. Any discussion? Oh, I guess we should have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by alternate Director Jonas. Any discussion on this item? Director Nicholson.
So this gravel problem is created by private forest land management issues historically, and is there no, do the current forest, I understand the property has changed hands, but don't you acquire those those problems when you purchase land? And would not the forest companies be responsible for dealing with this problem? I'm not quite sure why this is sort of an offloading thing, and I don't understand why the CBRD should be taking this on.
Well, I guess I'll take that. This has been a historical issue in which there have been gravel removal exercises by various owners and organizations, and this has been a historical activity that's been going on for some time. But in anticipation of not only this sort of activity, but a lot of the flood management activity that goes on in the region that we're in right now, the eastern reaches of the Cowichan, this is exactly the type of activity that the flood management function was created for. And there's been a number of circumstances in which partnerships have been created to address this. And this is, as I said, right down the alley of the type of work that the flood management function was supposed to do. So the initial challenges as to why this situation has been created may be related to upper watershed activities. This is a partnership that I think will prove to be beneficial not only to the association that we're entering into the partnership with, but the fisheries individuals and other organizations have looked at this as a perfect scenario where the CVRD can be the applicant, but we have the community group that is taking on all of the responsibility of the administrating of this. So this is a win-win scenario that the CVRD has anticipated, and this fits, I would suggest, almost perfectly with the resolution that's been put before us. Do you have a follow-up?
I have a comment. I understand the project and have no quarrels with how the project would be done, but it looks to me like it would be a long-term commitment because that creek is in bad shape and it needs serious remediation. And I'm wondering, if one does this, what's the incentive for the forest companies to come to the table and help develop a watershed plan for that creek that would help resolve this over the long term?
Well, I would suggest that the forest companies are partners in this, maybe not specifically in the details of this, but we've had active participation from upper watershed forest companies that have realized that some past practices have been a challenge for some of the tributary creeks. And I would suggest that they are at the table, maybe not specifically in this, but are partners in working with the regional district and local residents to address issues like this. Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Director Nicholson makes a good point, and I'm not sure that her question was answered, whether they are at the table. Like, maybe in theory they're at the table, but is there a way to get them to the table now instead of, she has a good point that, once we start pulling off the Band-Aid, it's going to start unraveling. Has that been considered?
Well, my understanding is that the various forest companies have been actively working, and when there was a site meeting held with staff and the applicants, that we had representatives from one forest company that was there and participating in the work and has been consulting and working with this specific project. Have we addressed upper watershed issues on private land with this? No, we haven't. Mr. Hitami.
Can I make a comment? As I mentioned, this is going to be an interim solution, but long-term, we have to develop actually a sort of a strategy for gravel management. So lots of other partners will be at the table. So you're right, maybe that's a solution. It's the Band-Aid, yes, could be, but for future, long-term, we need to have that strategy and identify all of the players.
And can I follow up?
Follow up.
And just maybe some financial investment as well, so that it's not just the CVRD like Director Nicholson has pointed out. So that's
When we develop
good
that
planning.
strategy, yeah, it's good planning. Yeah, we have to.
Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor and those opposed, the motion carries. Back to R1, and that will be Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here to present the April Building Department report for you all. For our highs and lows, we had a total of 36 permits issued in this month. Our average for April is 42, and that's since 2007, so it's a little bit lower. But just to let you know that already in this month, we've issued 42 permits, and it's only halfway through May, so we're way ahead of pace as far as May goes. For our future projects, the BC Transit Building has come across my desk already. We have 70 permits in the queue right now, total permits, so we have quite a bit on everybody's desk. Building values for the month was 5.6 million, and for a total of almost 30 million for the year. New housing starts, we had 7 in the month, which brings us to a total of 50 for the year. And I checked that we have about 30 plus houses sitting in the queue to be issued right now, so it's quite a few houses waiting to be issued. Building permits issued, that's 151 total for the year. It's a pace that's second best since 2010 and third best in last 10 years. So I've also included the usual pie chart just to show where the values are in the different areas. So Area B is still out in front of everybody else, but there's been some big projects in Area B over the past with the school and the not Brentwood College, the Shawnigan Boys School. We tend to get a lot of projects out of them. So it just stays on for this year. So I've run that for both the month and for the year. So I think Area B for the year is 1.9 million, but total for the year is 13 million. I've included a new slide here because I've had some question about some of the impacts. So with the amount of permits that we're issuing, I made this up from 2013 to 2017. So you can see that our permits back in 2013, we issued 345. So that basically generated about 2,760 inspections. Now what ends up happening over the years is we've basically got a 46% increase. Now, if you average out 8 inspections per permit, it works out, I figured in 2017 it's about 4,000 inspections to be done. And also I worked out that it's about 16 kilometers per inspection on average when you add them all up together. So it works up to 65,000 kilometers last year and just on the road. The other thing that's happening with the CVRD for us is that the permits are starting to come farther and farther away to the outskirts. We've got Goldstream Heights, Woodland Shores, and some other developments. So it's, the guys are definitely keeping busy. So thank you, and any questions?
And I think we have some. I've got Director Davis, Clement, and Acton. Director Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Ian, for the report. I was just wondering what kind of average wait there is for building permits.
Right now, it's probably 3 weeks to 4 weeks right now. We're doing our best. We're trying to streamline, and I'm also trying to find efficiencies to kick certain things out. And unfortunately, it is taking a bit longer, but you can see by our numbers why it's taking longer.
Yeah, it's a lot better than it was last year, so yeah,
We're getting to that hard time of year, unfortunately. Summertime for us will probably put a bind. We're actually in that ramping up part of the year, and that's why I say when I show those stats, it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Thank you.
Director Clement.
Would you mind just going back to the slide of mileage and inspections? So we see quite the increase over these last 4 years, and I'm curious to know, we, in that duration of 2013 to 2017, have we added any building inspectors?
We did add a front counter plan checker, so he's really helped. So as we get, he's sort of taking with the workload. Now, what we used to have a real problem with is front counter duty. So that would really take a lot of time. I mean, even if it was a 5-minute conversation, if you're working on a plan check and lost it, you're probably losing 10 or 15 minutes because you got to get back and get organized again. So that has really helped us in order to keep up with these kind of numbers.
And that plan checker was just making sure that all the paperwork was in order and nothing was missing, so there wouldn't be a delay?
He's dealing with realtors, phone calls, a lot of things that are generic questions that typically were handled by the inspectors.
Now, you talk about efficiencies and trying to streamline things, and I know one of those was the electronic permit issuing in the
Yes.
field, and that has been helpful, I take it?
That's been very helpful, actually.
Now, I'm curious to know, whether it be Mr. Blackwell or yourself, I'm curious to know what kind of capacity are we operating at right now? Like, you're saying that you're full out right now, and it could be, the wait times could be getting longer. I'm just curious to know, how much longer are we looking at until we need another building inspector?
Well, that'd always be me pitching for one. We're already at full capacity. I mean, the fact that the wait time is as long as it is, that's just going to get longer if the permits keep coming in the way they're coming in. I fully expect them to keep coming in. From hearing the development, there's the Poldy development's coming up, and that's going to really impact us. So it's always a wave, and it's always hard to judge. But like I say, right now, all I see is it getting worse before it gets better.
And if I could...
Hang on, Mr. Blackwell?
Thank you. I could perhaps add a little bit to that. So Mr. McDonald indicated that permit issuance for a standard single-family residence, everything being in order, is roughly 4 weeks. So if building inspectors had a clean slate to be able to work on one, they should be able to get one out within about 2 days, ideally, if everything was in order. So in order, so that's so if we were to create a fast-track system, it would be somewhere in the order of 2 to 4 days, roughly, give or take. So we are that far away from hitting that metric. So if that there was a desire to change that, knowing that the numbers that Mr. McDonald's indicated are going to be skewed significantly through June, July, August, and largely September, then those numbers are going to increase. We don't have the capacity at all to reduce beneath 4 weeks at this point. I mean, I could speculate that the time to issue a permit will increase significantly. So if we're ever to hit even a 7-day turnaround, you can see by contrast how far off we are with regard to resourcing to be able to hit that.
Final follow-up?
So we have our first community meeting tonight at Kerry Park around the affordable housing, and this is one of the points that you pretty much hit the nail on the head of what I'm asking is, if we were to add another building inspector in the next budget cycle, are we looking at getting down to that level? Or are we still like 2-3 inspectors out to get to that fast track system you're referring to?
Mr. Blackwell?
Thank you. Through you. So we've not undertaken that degree of analysis. Certainly the more bodies working on processing, the more quickly the processing becomes. But it's hard to predict. You look at those statistics, it's hard to predict whether the planets are in alignment with regard to building and so forth. And we're seeing a surge in this that will subside over time, in which case, if there was an appetite to increase capacity, to increase service delivery, then you could do it on a 1 or 2 year, pilot, we'll call it, a term kind of assignment. But on the other hand, if it was felt that this is the new normal, as more and more people discover the area, and as the area grows, as we're anticipating by 2050 an increase of roughly 25,000 people, you can expect that the numbers you see will likely, give or take, be the new normal.
Thank you, Director
Oh, Mr. Chair, I just have one. Can I step
Go
forward
ahead.
for the I think what I was trying to explain by this chart too was that it becomes a double-edged sword. So as we're doing more inspections, like more permits are coming in, but that's also putting this increased workload on the number of inspections at a time, and I'm also saying the distance. So by doing that, it really impacts the amount of time there is to actually issue permits, and the priority becomes going out and doing the inspections. So it does come back to that Manning issue, and we will have to address that in the coming years.
Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious, so in Shawnigan, I've been getting several emails or phone calls about people suddenly developing their property along the lake. So is there a way for the public to easily find out whether people have a permit? And so that's one question. And then my other question is there also a way to incent people to make sure that they have a permit? And how many people actually build without using a permit? And how is that anxiety rectified with the public?
One question.
Mr. McDonald?
First question was permits. Anybody can phone in, and even our plant checker Doug, or anybody can answer that question at the front. That's readily public available if somebody has a permit. What was question number 2? Because you had quite a few.
What's the incentive for people to get a permit? Like, is there a fine if you don't have a permit, and how large is that fine? And then what's the process like this?
Mr. McDonald.
I should know, but
Right now, currently, there's a double permit fee for building without a permit, and then beyond that, contrary to that, would be $1,000 per offense. And we have used it, and it seems to be quite effective.
And then I guess my last question was, how many, is there an estimate of how many people go without getting a permit? Or like, do you do anything way after the fact once it's completely built?
Fortunately, there aren't many, and I personally go after most of them. That's just the guys don't have the amount of time to do that. So there's probably half a dozen on my desk right now. That, but because they're I would not an incentive, but de-incentive by finding people. That effective measure is fortunately stopped that kind of activity. So we'll never stop it entirely because some of the outreaching areas that people think that we don't see them, but we do.
Okay, thank you. I think sometimes there's a bit of anxiety about all that stuff in our community. Thanks.
Mr. Blackwell?
Yeah, thank you. There was one other point I neglected to mention. So I think it's important to drill down a little bit on the travel time. So Mr. McDonald has indicated that each inspection is roughly 16 kilometers, and that's 65,000 kilometers in a year. So just based on some really quick and rough calculations, if it takes 1 minute to travel 1 kilometer, then roughly we're talking about 1,083 staff hours in the car out of every year, which calculates at 155 days of driving, which is when you think about somebody sitting in their car for 155 days driving from site to site to site without actually doing any inspection. It's a considerable drain on the resources. Very, very different reality than a situation like the city of Nanaimo, where it's a very confined area, and the amount of resource lost to travel is an entirely different equation.
Do you have a follow-up for this information item? Certainly.
Thank you. I think that hours comment is interesting, though, because that is maybe something that could be looked at in the future where people could, an inspector could work more remotely with technology and planning, where when you see the inspector, you just be working with a team, somebody in here, or just commenting on that.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other hands, move to our next item. Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you.
Just like to mention to everyone that items that are recommended to the board should be going to the next board meeting Wednesday, May 23rd. And with that, I just also want to mention we've got a couple of staff have some deadlines for later this afternoon. We may need to, depending on the length of some of the reports, may have to bump a couple of up in the order. With that, I will go to John Munn for R2. Floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Chair. I'm here this afternoon to present development variance permit application. Where are we? That's 05B17 DVP on Rich Hand Way in the Shawnigan Lake area. As described in the report, the building was moved from its intended location because of soil conditions. And moving the building resulted in an error in calculation, which was only discovered at the framing stage when the survey was done. So here you can see the aerial shot. We just happened to find one that was pretty close to the foundation time. It's in the R3 zone. And a strata development, which is connected to water. And there's the front of the house, and the variance is at the rear. Rear yard is at the park boundary. And it's a variance of 4.5 meters to 4.15 meters. That's a difference of 0.35 meters, about 1 foot. So it's fairly straightforward. Unfortunately, the applicant described in his application that an error was made and they're looking for a variance.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, Director Acton, move the recommendation, seconded by Director Clement. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries, and that will go to the Wednesday, May 23rd meeting. Mr. Munn, R3.
Good afternoon again. And the next application is for a development permit in the Cowichan Bay area, number 16D17DP. This application is in the areas for habitat, critical habitat protection and rural character. Note that DPs will be eligible at the building stage as well. This is the property located on Pritchard Road. At the far upper right of the screen, the picture, you can see that's Cowichan Bay, the waterfront. And to the left is the ravine where there is heron nesting to the, well, farther to the left. And I can describe more of that if you want. The proposed subdivision, there's our zone, again R3 in this, this zoning bylaw. And here's our Great Blue Heron Critical Habitat Protection Area. You can see the subject property is at the north of that area, basically on the edge. The report describes that wildlife, the provincial wildlife tracking of this heron nesting says it's moved a little bit north, which affects this slightly. The subdivision proposes 3 lots, and Lot C is most affected by this area, but Lot A and B are also within that area somewhat. So the 2 main issues emerging here are, first, for protection of the nesting habitat, and that's been outlined in a report by a professional biologist. The second major issue is that of geotechnical engineering regarding soils. That's largely comes out in the guidelines regarding rural character and subdivision. So the main issues that arise there, actually I'll just go back. Where are we? Okay, I'm just going to go back to the aerial photo. And you can see the area in the middle there. There's a white dot in the middle of the lot. That is a location of a spring. So there was some drainage concerns due to layers of soil and water flowing through sand, and a small spring resulted, which has existed there for a while. They had some kind of fountain or something. And now when it's being divided, the main recommendations are that the buildings be at some distance from that pond area, and that there be systems for collecting water, rainwater primarily, and a rain garden to filter through and conserve water. And with that, the recommendation is to address those main issues. Oh, forgot to show you the photos. Here's the front of the property, and on Gillis Road, fronts on 2 frontages there, and that's the edge of the ravine habitat area. And would you like me to read the recommendation? or-
Not just yet. I'll ask if the committee has any questions for staff. Seeing none. Oh, Director Nicholson.
Do we know how many herons are still nesting there?
Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you. I was going to speak to that once I move the resolution, but I just, this recommendation on here was from 2013, and I think I read in some parts that it was inactive. I'd like to update the committee that there's 103 nests, 99 of them are active. It is the nursery colony for Vancouver Island, and our community has worked extremely hard to protect this. And I know there has been talk that at any time heron can move, but it is definitely a critical habitat area for us that we've worked really hard in our community. So that's just updating you that what's going on with the heron rookery. Thank you.
Did you want to move the recommendation?
And I want to move the recommendation.
Do we have a seconder? Okay.
Oh, and I have another question. Oops.
Director Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering if there's a way of reinforcing the need for the covenant with new owners. We recently had a situation in Area A where a covenant restricting vegetation removal in a farmland buffer was ignored. So is there any way of
Mr. Blackwell?
educating them?
Thank you. So through you, covenants, I would suggest in my experience, they're an unfortunate tool. I think commonly we have all kinds of expectations around what restrictive covenants will do and won't do. I would say it's a bit of a hammer where a scalpel is needed. You know, it is a tool that has effect, but in order to bring effect, it's usually after the fact. And it is something that has to be resolved through a court injunction. So it's cumbersome, it's costly, and there are responsibilities with regard to owning, we'll say, restrictive covenants, insofar as taking the time to inspect that the provisions of the covenant are honored every so often. I mean, there's some freedom within local government to set how frequently, but we can't just, in terms of the jurisprudence, it says that we can't just register these covenants and walk away from them and hope everything is fine. If we want them to have any force or effect, we actually have to actively, in quotations, monitor these. So, you know, are there more nuanced ways that could integrate better with restrictive covenants? There can be. In my experience, with regard to a critical habitat area, there was a requirement for, in the context of a development project, the posting of signage on each lot that established the covenant line. There's nothing to stop the homeowner from pulling out those metal signs. At the end of the day, I would suggest public awareness is probably the most effective tool. Kind of residents observing and monitoring and stewarding these assets is the surest way to achieve conformity with the objectives. Tools like covenants are often misleading in terms of what they can achieve.
Do you have a follow-up?
No, just
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Director Yanni DiNardo, comment?
Yes, speaking of covenants, it is, in this particular community, there is an ownership of that heron rookery, so I think they're pretty much covered by the community themselves that are policing it. So that is the most, like you've just said, that's the most valuable in parks and everything, and this is parkland as well. So we get reports when they arrive, we get reports when they're in the singles bar, we get reports on everything all the time. So we have a community that's really taken this seriously, so I think the covenants would be respected.
Thank you. Mr. Blackwell, would you please read the recommendation? Question for staff. Go ahead, Director
I
Yanni
would just,
DiNardo.
the three lots with 3 or more, is there parkland with this?
It's 2 additional lots. I
Oh.
don't believe there's a park
Okay,
location.
thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blackwell, would you read the recommendation, please?
Thank you. The recommendation before you has 3 parts. Firstly, that it be recommended to the board, 1, that development permit application number 16-D-17DP at 1841 Pritchard Road for a 3-lot subdivision be approved. 2, that a restrictive covenant be registered on title for the 3 proposed lots to restrict construction in accordance with 1, the recommendations outlined in section 4.0 of the Ecologic Consulting Great Blue Heron Nesting Assessment Report dated October 10th, 2013, and 2, the recommendations outlined in the RISAC geotechnical letter dated May 19th, 2017, and 3, that the General Manager of Land Use Services be authorized to permit minor revisions to the permit in accordance with the intent of Development Permit Guidelines of OCP Bylaw Number 3605.
And I believe we've had this duly moved and seconded.
have.
And alternate Director Jonas, do you have a question?
Just in view of what happened in Surrey with the peacocks, I don't know if anybody knows about it, but in Surrey, it was in the news, a guy moved into a property and there was like 200 peacocks on the property. And of course they're loud. And he cut down the tree where the peacocks were. They went on his roof and it created a big mess. I don't know if anybody saw that in the news. Are herons noisy?
Yes. They're noisy, they're messy, and everyone who's lived in around them understands that.
So are the new owners of the property going to understand that?
Director Yanni DiNardo?
Yes, everyone, and these owners have lived down the road, but everyone in the community, or even moving in, there's a new condo building that went in, and they all understood completely. We have a huge educational program on that, that their heron rookery is behind them and it's priority in the community, so they value that. They put up with a little bit of noise for a little while.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I'll call the question. All those in favor and those opposed, that motion carries. Thank you, John. R4, Ms. Rondo. Just like to remind committee that there's, in addition to our work here today, I believe there's a affordable housing workshop that is on, and we have a couple of important items further in the agenda, so I just remind you of that. Ms. Rondo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. This is a development permit application that proposes subdivision of the property into 3 new lots. It's located on Wilmot and Pritchard Roads in Cowichan Bay. The zone is R3, which specifies a 700 square meter minimum parcel size if the lots are connected to community sewer and water, which they will be. The application is subject to the rural character development permit area guidelines as well as the subdivision guidelines. Here are 2 photos demonstrating the site. As noted in the report, there's an existing home that dates back from 1904, and no changes are currently proposed to that lot, which is the most northern lot, except for some internal renovations that are occurring right now. The Ministry of Transportation required some clearing along Wilmot and Pritchard's in order to improve the sight lines at that intersection. So here are some photos of the existing dwelling. The principal requirement to be satisfied in this development permit area was around stormwater management. McElhaney prepared a stormwater management and erosion control plan, and that's attached, and all of the conditions that are within that will be met either prior to subdivision approval if any works are required on the ground, or they'll be rolled into subsequent development permit area development permit requirements associated with the new buildings. Staff have reviewed the application and recommend that the development permit be approved as it complies with the development permit area guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rondo. Does committee have questions for staff? Director Yanni DiNardo.
Is the applicant here as well?
Yes, Leanne, the owner, and the agent, Reg Harding.
Okay, because I'm
Hang
not
on.
sure if it's for staff or the applicant. And
Why
this
don't you try
question-
staff first?
Okay, I'll try staff first. Ministry of Transportation and the community with our Parks Department have been working, it's a priority for the last 5 or 6 years to get an off-road walking trail on Wilmot Road. And the community's familiar with another part of Wilmot Road where every applicant that has come in has successfully added on to their property the off-road walking trail to have it continued and carry on. So Wilmot Road up by Coverdale Watson Park, it's an off-road walking trail. And we really wanted, wherever we could, with any development on Wilmot Road, to continue on with that aspect, because it's actually extremely dangerous walking, not only our village area, but even some of the. So I'm wondering if there was any consideration from the applicant to honor any type of off-road work and providing this access for the rest of the community.
Ms. Rondo?
Well, I can't speak to the applicant directly. However, what I can offer is that, so the Ministry of Transportation originally looked at adding a requirement to widen Wilmot Road here, but my understanding is that reduced the area of the lots. So what they have done alternatively is they've required the applicants, as part of subdivision approval, to place a no-build covenant along a portion of Wilmot Road in the matter of 3.9 meters wide. And so that would, and that is specifically mentioned in order that in the future, they're aware that road widening may occur down the road. And sorry, that was just so funny. I had to stop there.
We need a little comedy
Yeah, thank
once
you.
in a while. Thank you, Rochelle.
It really wasn't that funny. But I lost my train of thought now.
It sounds
But
like that answers her question, though.
But yeah, just to sort of finish up, along Wilmot Road, the entire length would also need to be widened to accommodate a future road and roadside path. And the Parks Department perhaps has some additional comments, but I'm aware that they've been working with the ministry for that, and the ministry knows that that's on our radar to do. So with this particular one, the applicants may be able to speak further with regards to whether a statutory right-of-way would be appropriate along that no-build area, but that hasn't been explored with them, nor the Parks Department.
Director Yanni DiNardo, a follow-up?
Thank you. Yeah, it has been, and we've spoken to ministry ourselves on the off-road path walking trails for pedestrian, even equestrian, we've talked about, and there seems to be more of an appetite for them to come on board. So actually making the roads wider just makes the cars go faster. So we're really, so I'm glad to hear that everybody has heard that, and possibly we'll make sure that that is a future possibility. Thank you.
Did we ask for mover and seconder of this recommendation? Don't believe so. Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by alternate Director Jonas. Any further discussion? Oh, I guess we haven't had it read out yet. Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board, 1, that development permit application number DP 18D06 at 1735 Wilmot Road be approved, and 2, that the general manager of land use services be authorized to permit minor revisions to the permit in accordance with the intent of the DP guidelines of OCP bylaw number 3605.
This item's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor and those opposed, that motion carries. R5, Ms. Rondeau, and this looks like it's almost a bit of housekeeping to refer this back, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. So this is an application for a rezoning and an amendment to the official community plan for Area D. The property is located road and the Trans-Canada Highway, and it was formerly or is currently the location of an RV sales business. The official community plan since 2014 has designated the property agricultural. Prior to that, it was designated as commercial. The zoning is A7, agricultural service, and since 2014 and prior to that, it was zoned C3, service commercial, which permitted a variety of uses related to automobiles and highway transportation, so including auto sales, RV sales, motorcycle sales, auto repair, some limited retail uses such as commercial nurseries and plant gardening equipment and sales, as well as building supplies. It also allowed for a service station. In 2014, as I noted, the zoning bylaw for Area D was adopted and changed the zoning for this property to A7. And as a result, a lot of the former uses are no longer permitted there, and the applicants have applied to rezone the property to essentially reinstate the former zoning. Throughout the process of this application, the applicants have been cooperative, and staff have engaged with them in developing perhaps a new zone that would combine some of the uses of the former C3 as well as the A7. It's difficult for staff working on the file to know whether the zoning change in 2014 was applied with intention or whether it was categorized because of the neighboring land uses. We do know specifically that the A7 zone was developed to transition the area towards more agricultural related uses, knowing that some of the adjacent properties were already non-conforming to the agricultural zone. This property is a bit different in that it had correct zoning for the uses that were occurring at the time. The OCP also recommends broadly in reducing auto dependency in the electoral area. Staff's original assumption in processing the application is that this would default back to its original zoning should the application be approved. However, with further consideration and discussion, staff are recommending that there's an opportunity here to develop a new zone that would perhaps achieve the objectives of supporting agriculture, building on the surrounding uses while broadening the zone. Staff are recommending that a new zone be developed focusing on land uses supportive of agriculture and neighboring areas, but while at the same time reducing the emphasis on auto-related uses. Here are some photos from the site. So there's the existing building. And towards the rear of the site, it's also on the east side adjacent to the couch and golf course. And as I noted, there's a couple options that are presented in the staff report. One is to approve the application as proposed by the applicants, which is revert back to a zone that's very similar to the C3 zone, or create a new hybrid zone. In the recommendation, it's recommended that based on planning principles for the area, maybe move away from auto-related uses solely. And then the third option, of course, is to deny the application. So those are all within your staff report, and staff are recommending establishment of a new zone after undertaking a detailed analysis of the area to determine what uses would be appropriate there. Thank you.
Questions for staff? Director Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the recommended option is chosen, where would this fit into the staff's work plan? Is that a near term or longer term?
Mr. Blackwell?
Thank you. So this would be considered part of our operational work. So this would not be, you'd have to be squeezed into that. It would not be a special project, et cetera. It would be part of that continuum.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? All right, I'll turn to the director of the area. Move the
Oh, and also the applicants are here and they have a presentation too.
They have a presentation.
They would like
Okay.
to speak to it.
Then before I take your recommendation, would the applicants like to come forward?
Hi there, thank you. I'm Doug Allen, the owner of the property. Sorry for the glasses. I had surgery yesterday and don't see too good at the moment. Hopefully better soon. But
Welcome.
my wife, thank you. My wife would like to express our side of the project that we find ourselves in. So thank you.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. First off, thank you for allowing us to make our presentation concerning the rezoning of our property, hopefully back to its original C3 zoning permitted uses. We're not public speakers, and in fact, the last time I did speak in front of people, I threw up, so I'll try to stand clear of your computer.
Deep, take your time.
Yeah, and I noticed there was a box of Kleenex, so whether I cry or throw up, I think I'll be fine. We are very nervous, but mainly we're just really mad. We're fighting for our lives here and the future of our retirement. We purchased the above-mentioned property in October 2004. It was zoned C3 and indeed had been C3 since 1972. We operated a very successful RV sales, service, and parts sales business at that location from 2004 to August of 2016, when due to age and failing health, we sold the business and partially retired. We leased the premises to the company that purchased the business on a 2-year lease, which expires in August of this year. We decided to list the building for sale in the fall of 2017 as we wanted to fully retire, and the land and buildings represented a large part of our retirement savings. On October 31st of 2017, we received an offer to purchase the property listed above. The offer was immediately rescinded as the zoning was not the C3 that we had indicated on the listing for sale, but indeed was A7. We have owned this property since 2004 as C3, and it has been C3 since 1970 when it was originally logged. On November 2nd, we went to the CVRD and found out that indeed there had been a downzoning of the property without any notice to us in 2014. And this is where my notes get a little strange, because in here I had mentioned names, and since I've been here, I'm trying to be respectful to take any name references out of here. So if I'm staggering in my comments, please just bear with me.
I should just let you know that we've all had the full staff report and have read it, so that you won't have to cover a whole bunch of ground over.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
fair enough.
I do understand
Okay, good,
that. Thank you. And although my report looks long, it's in really big writing, so I can read it. So we sent an email to the CVRD, who indeed responded that the property had been rezoned in 2014, but that there was an argument that could be made to having the zoning reversed to the original C3 or similar zoning due to its unique circumstances. We met a couple of days later with the 2 staff members, both of whom appeared generally sympathetic to our plight and promised to work with us to rectify the situation. They commented that it was done in error, citing a clerical error that had caused the boundary to be included, to include our property, and that the downzoning should not have happened. It was said that the most expeditious way to handle this was to have it rezoned back to the original C3 zoning. They both assured us that if we applied to have the zoning reverted back to the original C3, the zoning would be put back to its original permitted uses. It was also suggested at that time that we should respectfully ask for the fees to be waived given the certain unique circumstances of the C3 zoning on our property being taken away without much forethought. We were not happy to have to pay for the zoning put back to its original C3 because of a CVRD mistake, but the only other choice was to wait for 2 years when they reviewed the zoning again. We were told that the property would be put back to its original C3 permitted uses at that time, but we didn't want to have to wait because time was of the essence, so we applied for the rezoning. We have been asked why we didn't participate in the zoning process that took place in 2013. The answer is a very easy one. We were busy working. We worked 12 to 14 hours each day, barely making it home for a quick late meal and then to bed, only to wake up again in the morning and do it all over again. For many years, we operated 7 days a week. Also, for a number of years, we operated a hobby farm with cows, pigs, laying hens, and meat birds. We didn't have time to refer to the internet or watch social media to see if anything was happening with the zoning on our property. We were busy working and building our future. We would have expected that if anything were happening with the zoning, that at least we would have received a letter from the CVRD stating the review. It is a point of common courtesy to a landowner. We must point out at this time that the property size is 1.5 acres in size, and the minimum requirement for A7 zoning is 2 acres. So from a size standpoint, the property doesn't qualify. The property has low capability for food production due to previous non-farm use. And there was a report that Rochelle had provided that states that the current use or the C3 use of the property that we had would not detract from the aesthetic appeal of the rural agricultural landscape or negatively impact neighboring agricultural or rural uses. And that additionally, the property does not appear to be subject to ALR restrictions. She had developed a list of proposed uses for the property, which would have included motor vehicle sales, including rentals, motor vehicle part sales, automotive service, wholesale and retail sales, recreational vehicle, boat, motorcycle equipment sales, rental, and servicing. In total, there were 24 separate categories or proposed permitted uses. Again, we received the above reference report on May 1st. When she presented it to the manager, everything changed. On May 10th, we were informed that the CVRD will not allow automotive or recreational vehicle sales service on our property. The CVRD's wishes to eliminate all of these uses, dramatically reducing the value of our property. I might point out that businesses that operate within these categories are not undesirable businesses. Perhaps what the CVRD should consider is to allow incentives to businesses they want, rather than creating more mandates to discourage businesses they don't. Planning should not just be about the land, but also about the people who own the land. I do understand the direct correlation between the land and its people. The soul of a community is not just how it looks. The soul is also about how the community supports its people by allowing flourishing businesses that employ people so that they in turn can support their community. Without this type of interaction, the community has no soul. The severity of the economic impact on us, the landlord, and the degree of interference with our anticipated and distinct investment opportunities was not taken into account. We feel that the CVRD did not adequately consider the degree of interference with our investment opportunity. The downsizing deprives us of all or substantially all practical uses of the property. The downzoning eliminates the former C3 uses of the property in favor of less profitable uses, therefore vastly reducing our ability to continue to earn the anticipated income that we had expected by investing in the property with the correct C3 zoning. We have the right to expect that the CVRD would allow us to continue to have the original zoning uses for that property that it has had since the 1970s. Nothing has changed on the property. The use of the property remains the same as it always has been. We believe that our expectation is entirely reasonable, considering all we have done to protect our investment for our future. The usual result of downzoning is that the land is worth a lot less as it was before. We believe that we, the landlord, has the right to say what happens on the property we own, especially when the property has also been zoned correctly for the uses that we want. The CVRD does not pay for our mortgage, therefore should not be able to take away the major source of income that does pay the mortgage. The right to do what you purchase the property to do, especially with the correct zoning intact, should be an inherent right that comes with the landlord. And especially in this unique situation. On November 27, 2017, after a presentation by our lawyer, Scott Ritter, and Todd Blumel, the City of Duncan Council voted unanimously to make site-specific amendments to allow existing car dealerships in the corridor continue operations unhindered. Duncan's official community plan said that while new car dealerships along the corridor aren't wanted, existing dealerships are welcome to stay and continue their operations. While this occurred in a different area, the relationship with the land is the same as it is with ours. Our property has been zoned C3 since 1970s. The history of the property has been automotive, recreational, sales, and service related. Now, although we're not currently in business, our property is still being used for that purpose. This fact should have been recognized during the down zoning process, specifically because our property is the only one in that subdivision that had a C3 zoning attached to it. We purchased the land that was suitable for our business, and we operated it on this location successfully for many years. We invested in our community, hired local people, supported other businesses to help them thrive. We supported our family, employees' families, and helped make the Cowichan Valley a more viable entity. We invested in our future and in our retirement by purchasing the land that was correctly zoned for our business, paid taxes, paid insurance, paid property taxes, payroll taxes, government taxes, and everything else we had to do to be responsible and a viable business. We were committed to making our business a success and in turn helping the community be a success. We feel we were a major icon in the CVRD, and to be told to go away and be something different is just not right. We see it a violation of property rights. We feel that we will suffer as a result of losing the commercial zoning designation to which we had grown accustomed to. This situation has created an extreme hardship on us, not only financially, but health-wise also. We have lost 6 potential sales on our property because of the zoning issue. 4 of the sales were from automotive-related businesses. Offers have been substantially lower than they should be because of the current A7 zoning and the reluctancy of the CVRD to include automotive recreational vehicle sales, service, and part sales in the zoning for our property. All offers to date have been withdrawn because of the zoning issue. We cannot sell the property with the current zoning, as it does not attract the businesses that are attracted to the property. And that is the same thing for leasing.
Can I just ask you, are you near completion?
I'm
You've
like
given-
this far from being
Okay,
complete.
could you please wrap up?
I
Thank
will,
you.
thank you. There are a number of items that can be eliminated from permitted uses. And we have just recently received another offer from a business that wants to open their third automotive location in the Cowichan Valley. And they will be bringing more jobs to the area and be a viable and growing business in the community. But again, it depends on zoning. We purchased the property in 2004 as C3 zone property. Worked hard for many years to secure this property for our retirement. In the stroke of a pen, the CVRD took everything from us. They took our ability to sell the property and to make a profit to live during our retirement, or to lease the property and live during our retirement. Because the financial impact that this has had on us, we are now faced with the prospect of having to start up a business at the ages of 70 and 67. Doug has had open heart surgery and 3 heart attacks. His most recent heart-related event was March of this year, caused by the stress of this zoning situation.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I think we've heard enough. I'm fully in favor of what you're
Director
saying,
Kuhn?
but I think,
Order. Could you please?
Yes, I just
Wrap
have
up.
one more paragraph. And that was just to thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
You did very well, by the way.
No throw up.
Thank you for your.
Thank
input.
you. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this is a little bit difficult, and I have sympathy for the applicants. I was on the committee of the OCP. We did major work in the community trying to get out there. It was really difficult. And I'd also like to remind the committee that it is about land use. And with this recommendation that is here, it would be a new hybrid zone. So, you know, that whole, there's 7 lots along that area that can be viewed from the Trans-Canada Highway. I see that there is the Tim Hortons coming through that the APC from Area E worked really hard on for their landscape and the changes there. And they went through quite a revelation trying to get Tim Hortons in there. And also, if you do notice and go by there, we have the Co-op gas station that has come in that's done tremendous work to upgrade that section in that area. And so with looking at this with new fresh eyes, new things going in, that's what, you know, we've changed a lot since 1972. So I would like to move this recommendation, but first I have an amendment that I'd like to, or can I just add on that I would also like staff to host a neighborhood meeting that would include Area E, because I believe that we're connected and it's another node in our villages, and I'd like
So
to.
can I ask you, like, this recommendation with a community meeting? We don't have to say
Okay,
Area E or
thank you.
whatever. So
Yeah, this recommendation.
You'd like
and
to
host-
have this amended by having a community meeting at it. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, so Director Yanni DiNardo moves the amendment, Director Acton seconds. Any discussion on the amendment that a community meeting be added? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? On the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? The amendment carries. Director Nicholson.
I was wondering what the standard process for downzoning is.
Director, Mr. Blackwell, I just demoted you, sorry. Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. Through you, I'd be reluctant to use the term downzoning. I don't think downzoning applies here. This is a different zoning. This zoning, I would suggest in my brief exploration of it, reflects more of an agricultural zone. So those that come from the ag industry would see this as a perfectly viable zone. It's perceived as a down zone in terms of once being able to accommodate motor vehicle sales and associated uses. It's just a shift in zone. A down zoning would be somewhere where you would say allow 6 houses per acre and then changing the zoning to permit 1 house per acre. That would be a down zone. So this is still commercial, it's just a different range of commercial uses.
Follow-up?
What's the standard process for changing a zone?
It's a little off topic for this discussion, but if you can be brief, Mr. Blackwell, please.
Thank you, through you. So there's 2 processes. One is on an application basis. The applicant makes an application. If it's consistent with the OCP, there's no OCP amendment that goes with it. If it's consistent, if it's inconsistent, it's an OCP amendment as well. The second is through an area-wide zoning bylaw update following an OCP review.
Final follow-up.
So we're doing an OCP review in Area E, as you know, and so I just want to make sure that if any zones are changed as a result of the zoning bylaw, that there would be a assurance that the people who have those lots are notified, because it just seems not right that people aren't notified directly.
Fair point, but not germane to this discussion, so I'll go to Director Cook.
I am very much against hurting businesses, and it seems to me that this rezoning was done while the business was in existence, and I have no understanding as to how this could happen. We like businesses. Businesses pay taxes. We all benefit from that, and I can't understand how we can possibly go back and say, well, okay, this is agricultural now, and you can't continue on your business. If we do anything like Director Yanni DiNardo recommended, there should be as little impact as possible on the way these people do business, because I am in favor of business.
Director Yanni DiNardo to close.
Thank you, and we are in favor of business as well. When the community came up with the idea, at that time the business was connected to agriculture because the local farmers were saying there is no storage, cold storage. There was a lot of business that was attached to that, but it was attached to the local farmers and the food issue. So that's what we were hearing at that time. And also for the entire strip, to make sure that you're properly zoning like we did in the village of Cowichan Bay, is to go over and not like, well, it'll be a community meeting, but a charrette to say, okay, is this changed what this should be? But we were not taking away business. That wasn't ever the intent that I believe the community was doing.
Just want to confirm, I believe this has been moved and seconded and amended. Looking to staff, correct. So the amendment, okay, so moved by Director Clement, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any further comment, question in regards to the recommendation? Alternate Director Jonas.
How long is it going to, if it goes to the hybrid, how long would it take to change it to a hybrid designation?
Mr. Blackwell.
So I can't presume that there will be a hybrid designation. This has to go through a process, and ultimately it's the will of the board whether or not this gets changed. But before that, there's an OCP that's been in place for a number of years. The community has spoken to what it sees as a vision for this. Since, I believe, 2014, it's been this zoning. So in order to honor the community and its work around the OCP, there needs to be a neighborhood meeting that is reflective of that from staff's perspective, and then what is distilled from the community coupled with planning views on the issue. It'll be brought back for this committee to make a decision.
Do you have a follow-up to that, Alternate Director Jonas?
So what we're saying to investors as a whole is come to our community, invest. It might work out someday, or we might just change everything without telling you.
That's a very unfair comment. There's the circumstances that is being addressed, and we're concerned about the business people here. This was a circumstance that happened in a broader community exercise, and I don't think there's anybody here that wants to put our community at risk or the business community at risk, and we don't go changing zoning willy-nilly in the community. So I think that this happened. It's a rarity. I think I've seen it happen twice in 10 years. So I think we should be fair that this is a process that is about to be undertaken to help to make this situation right. So with that, I turn to Director Kuhn. Do you have anything new on this particular resolution?
Well, I just wonder, if it goes to a public hearing, and that's what's basically proposed, isn't it? Or at least the public will be involved in.
The resolution right now is to explore a detailed analysis for a hybrid zone. There's no mention of public hearing or anything at this point, so it's premature on that point.
Okay, what's the hybrid zone going to look like? What do we have in plan there? I mean, hybrid zone, it could be anything, and I'm not willing to just vote for anything where I don't even know what the end result's going to be.
Director Yanni Donato, do you have some input on this?
I'll try, yeah, the hybrid zone is to see that we have accomplished what the community's wishes are with the OCP and move forward with asking the broader community and seeing if what the hybrid zone could be. So this is about asking everyone and focusing directly on that. And so it's about opening it up to community and seeing that we're looking after everyone, not just piecemeal. So there's a whole strip of A7. We should be looking at everything. And then also across the street with Area E, and there's commercial zones, like looking at it in a broader perspective and what the community's wishes are. This is not telling anyone what we want them to do. It's about opening that to see what type of zone we can actually accommodate.
And I might add, in consideration of the applicants as well.
Absolutely.
Director Kuhn, final comment.
Yeah, what I'm interested in is it possible then that this so-called hybrid zone would basically do away with their business? Because that I'd had serious problems with.
I don't think you need to answer that. There's no exercise to eliminate business. If we've read the staff report, there's a situation has occurred. The applicants have come forward asking to be made whole, and that's what this exercise is about. It's very clear. So, having said that, is there any further comment on our comment or question on the recommendation? Do we need the recommendation read out? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion carries. 5-minute break. It looks like we're going to have to reorder a couple of items on the agenda. That recommendation will go to the board on the 23rd. I think I need you to invite Mr. Tippett to the lectern. We are now on R8. Moving it forward.
Is that working out?
Got to be somewhere.
It looks like it's working out. Okay, good.
Okay.
Thank you for your indulgence. I appreciate it because I have to go to the doctor at 4, and I'm not feeling 100%. So if I make any mistakes, it's not just my normal mistakes. I'm going to blame them on not feeling 100%. Anyhow, so what I want to do here is just run you through a very brief summary of the process that led to this draft official community plan for electoral area F that you had in your package. Let me just, oops, oh no, what did I do? What do I hit to go to the next slide? There we go. No, that's not it. What on earth is going on here? This thing went to the beginning of the whole thing.
There you go. Oh, R8.
I clicked on R8 and then it came up. Sorry. Yeah, it's R8. It's like way down near the bottom. See, it already happened. Okay, thanks. I don't know what happened there. Thanks, Kylie. Okay, so back to what I was trying to say. We did a community plan update for the first time in 19 years in electoral area F over the last little while. And this presentation is just to quickly summarize some of these events that led to this process. So, as I already said, the last update to the Area F plan was in 1999. It's quite a while ago already. The area has changed quite a bit since then. So therefore, we wanted to reflect upon the changes to the area that have occurred over the past 20 years, minus, because the previous plan was actually written in 1998. This draft plan proposes a more positive vision of the community's future. I think it's fair to say that at the time the last plan was written, and at that time, by the way, it was an Area I and F plan combined, the forest business was still a bit more robust than it is now. There was a sawmill still in Yubo, which is why I'm mentioning Yubo, even though it's not an Area F. It was part of the same plan. And things have changed quite a bit. And so I think one of the struggles that the community members I was working with, essentially the steering committee was the APC, were trying to identify what that new future might be. And so I'll take you through a few of the highlights. I don't want to go page by page or anything. Just do a really high-level overview here. So what we aim to do is produce a condensed, simplified structure to make it easier to read the plan. The current plan, the one that's in place now and has been since '99, has a number of advocacy policies in it that don't involve matters within our jurisdiction. Ambit's another fancy word for that. And although it's tempting to have a lot of that stuff in a plan, I think that that me in particular, and also the steering committee I was working with, was keen on just drilling down to those things that we can actually directly affect. And so you'll notice a relative lack of that in the draft plan text. And now why is this frozen? Come on. Oh, there we go. Oh, geez. My fingers aren't working on that pad. I should use the other thing. Okay, so the declining population over the past decades highlights the need for a new community vision that would lead to a more prosperous future. There has been a population decline. Commercial businesses have shut down in the area. It's needing some help, and we wanted to find a positive way to turn that into a positive for the community, to find things that we could recommend and suggest in the plan that would actually lead to a better future, rather than just saying, oh, gee, it's too bad we're not growing anymore or whatever. What are we going to do about it? In this case, they took a positive vision and tried to move forward with that. And then the fourth point that came up prematurely is we're introducing village containment boundaries for Honeymoon Bay and Massachi Lake for the first time in Area F. Go to the next page here. Paired with that village containment boundaries, we're establishing service area boundaries on a map that align with the village containment boundaries, which would have the effect of limiting the spread of servicing, water and sewer, into areas that are not scheduled for development, which is something that does not exist in the present plan. We don't really have a coherent servicing policy in the present plan. One other note here, and I think there's a bit of a synergy here. The Dididat First Nation has been meeting with the CVRD for some time, talking about their desires vis-a-vis the future, and one of those desires is to see South Shore Road west of Gordon Bay become a public road. They see that as an economic development opportunity for their nation, and also a safety issue for their community, so they can gain access to the various community services that aren't in their own community. This plan looks at that and is supportive of it, and looks at opportunities that might be linked to the potential public ownership of that roadway, and describes a few scenarios where the CVRD might be proposing community benefit apart from the First Nation in respect of that too. So the two things that are principally related to that are there's support for the possible creation of one or two future residential or recreational development nodes to the west of Gordon Bay if the road becomes public and very large public amenities are provided for. And the very large public amenities, there's a guideline in the proposed policy that states that 50% of the land and 50% of the waterfront, assuming it's a waterfront property, would have to be sort of offered as the minimum amenity plus other amenities and a bunch of other conditions as well. So the intent is not to have strip development from one side to the other. In fact, one of the two future residential nodes, if there are indeed two, might in fact be around Kaikus, which is already a bit of a node. Going to the next point related to that, there's general support for the establishment of tourist recreational opportunities west of Gordon Bay. What do we mean by that? Do we mean squatter camping or traditional camping? No, we mean actual resorts where maybe a fishing lodge or something like that might come into being. Will it happen? I don't know, but that's something that the people who are working with staff on the plan review thought would be something to support. There's also support for an integrated sewage solution for Massachi Lake and Honeymoon Bay in the plan, and that's integrated into the village containment boundaries and also the servicing section. And regarding general environmental development permits, there would be new development permit guidelines regarding docks and wildfire interface areas, so that doesn't exist right now. There have been a number, as you can imagine, of amendments to the OCP over the years, creation of new land use designations when rezoning applications came forward and plan amendments were necessary. We tried to assess those and limit the number of land use designations for residential type use, and we hope that'll be reflected in the zoning, so it might end up being a much more easily understood bylaw in the end. So with that, I'm on the recommendation. I can either read it to you, or I think the chair might want to make some minor change to it, or I could let Ross do that. Mr. Chair, I'll leave it in your hands.
Thank you. First questions for staff, Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have, one of my issues, I think you all know, is camping on lots and RVs on lots, which I noticed that in all around the lake, there's quite a bit of it. And how did you accomplish any of the recreation areas or change any? Because there is so many recreation areas around the lake. How have you embedded this in your OCP? That, and the other thing I think we've had a lot of issues on is Airbnb and that type of stuff. Has that been acknowledged at all in this?
Mr. Chair, okay, on the first question, I gather you're just talking about the historical camping activities that have occurred around there. Yeah, we're not trying to directly address that. There was a work program item a couple of years ago that we didn't get to, which was a lake non-statutory plan, I think, which was intended to look at that issue in some depth. I think that's what's really needed. So we're not really diving into that. I think there are rights that exist to camp in those areas based on legal nonconformity and the former provisions of the Forest Act. But what we are also trying to do is find a way to get tourists, actual tourists who are not looking to buy a timeshare or anything like that, who are just traveling through, want to spend 3, 4, 5 days at the lake, try and find opportunities for them to, park an RV or get a hotel room or whatever. So that's part of what you're seeing on the recreational side of it, where we're looking at fishing lodges and other things like that. Now, the second question you had was?
Airbnb.
Airbnb, thank you. Nothing specific to that either. I think the details of that will be worked out when we bring zoning forward. I've always been an advocate for blended zoning in certain communities where you allow both residential and commercial short-term rentals. I think it works well in ski resorts. It works potentially well in some areas. It's touchy because it depends on the community and whether you have a majority of full-time residents or not. But so I think we'll probably face that in more depth when the zoning is drafted, and it might even require, if we take a certain direction, some amendments to this plan. But at the moment, no change is proposed in that regard.
Follow-up?
I think there's a huge component around the lake that needs to be looked at, because over the years, there's a lot of us that have purchased property years ago and assumed they could have their RV or whatever, and then there is no sort of rules, and then 20 years goes by, 30 years goes by. So if there's some guidelines, if you're working towards, because you are like it is going to be, and I think that it's going to be like a little Whistler, like, you know, it is a very active area. So I don't really see a whole connection to this, but maybe in the zoning you will be dealing with that, but just.
And I think I know where Mr. Blackwell was gonna go. We want to participate with Area I and the Town of Lake Couch on the statutory, not the Town of Lake Couch? Okay. But also, we will address this in zoning, address short-term rentals in a recent development that's just received approval. So I think it's been very clear that there isn't going to be cheek by jowl development past the end of the pavement, and that these nodes that Mr. Tippett referred to are the designated specific development zones for recreation and residential beyond the end of the pavement. So, Director Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll start with an easy one. It says in here, community water and sewer systems are operated by the CVRD. Are there no improvement districts in Area F? Because that was...
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Also interesting that the response from North Cowichan is that they support regional planning, and I was wondering how this new OCP would fit with the future harmonization of all of them together as far as the language and quite nice brevity goes.
Okay, he says
A little
don't ask
outside
him.
your crystal ball.
Well, no, I think that it's, I'll turn to Mr. Blackwell. He's going to answer it whether he likes it or not.
Thank you, through you. That's a very good question. So the harmonization and project of the OCP is a two-stage piece. Also 2050 factors into this. So some of the nuances have yet to be uncovered and discovered. Those will happen through ongoing dialogue. So it's an iterative process. My hope is that we're going to see far better alignment around some of these high-level objectives between the municipalities and the electoral areas, but I can't you know, prognosticate in terms of the degree to which there will be, you know, wonderful harmonization versus not.
And if I could ask someone to move and second this, I'd like to speak to it. Moved by Director Yanni Donato, seconded by Director Clement. Did you want to speak to this, Director Nicholson? Go ahead.
One question is about the wildfire interface development permits. So I'm wondering whether dealing with wildfire interface issues is best dealt with through development permits, or whether we should be really starting to think a little bit more seriously about where development happens in terms of wildfire risk.
Mr. Tippett?
Mr. Chair, that's a very good question. And actually, there's another potential approach there, too. There could be some, you know, theoretically, it'd be better if there were building code changes made that required, you know, buildings to not be susceptible to fire propagation. I think this has been a challenge throughout this valley. Like every electoral area that has forest in it seems to be in an extreme or a high risk area. And the only respite from that, I guess, is if you're in, say, Cowichan Bay, which doesn't have much forest, or, you know, the more urban areas. So, yeah, I mean, I think to answer your more philosophical part of the question, absolutely. Like, we probably should be not just developing, bless you, willy-nilly everywhere, but instead should be focusing in areas where there's a chance of reasonable fire protection. And this particular vision here talks about the creation, or maybe enhancement is a better word, of one of the existing nodes, which is very small right now, Kaikus, not developing the entire shoreline, so shoreline of the lake. And, you know, so is it better from a wildfire point of view than not developing at all? No. However, that's, I don't know, it's a challenge we face everywhere. It's really hard to do any development in most communities that we have without facing that issue head on. The other thing is development permits aren't necessarily the ideal method to deal with wildfire issues long-term because they're a snapshot in time. Somebody's subdividing or building a home or whatever it is, and you get to apply your guidelines, and 20 years later, being where we live, a lot of stuff grows up again, and we don't have a monitoring requirement. So there may be better tools available in the future that are, you know, more ongoing in nature, which we should explore when they come up.
Follow up?
Well, I just wondered if you talked about maybe 1 or 2 nodes along there for recreational tourist kind of things, and whether it warrants some proactive thinking about what makes the most sense in terms of wildfire risk.
Mr. Chair, there is actually some language in the plan. I believe it's in the policy concerning those type of consideration of those types of rezoning proposals that requires the preparation of some sort of wildfire management and evacuation plan, you know, in the course of dealing with the rezoning. So it's not like we're ignoring the issue. I guess the fundamental question is, if you're in a high-risk area, is that going to cause you to want to not support any human use or not? And I don't know, but we're focusing on the issue. We're looking at it as maybe a mitigatable issue in terms of human evacuation, at least. Protection of structures, we might be able to deal with that reasonably well with the development permit guidelines, and that's what we have at the moment.
I have a couple more questions, but I can wait if you like.
Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to pose to staff? Go ahead, Director Nicholson.
So my understanding is from a public input process, there was the APC that helped steer this project, but there hasn't been any public involvement other than that?
That's more or less correct. I mean, actually, this project was underway with Heather Cower when she was here, and I can't actually speak to whether she did any open houses or anything. I suspect not. Do you know, Director Morrison?
I don't believe so.
I don't believe so either, yeah. So I guess the best way to put it is this proposed plan that's attached to your agenda is essentially a major edit of the existing plan. It's not a you know, clean sheet of paper. Let's think about everything from the beginning type of plan. It's more of a major edit, and so that's how they decided to approach it. I think Director Morrison probably wants to recommend a process that might somewhat deal with what you're saying around the time of the hearing.
Right, because I'm just looking at what the recommendation is, and I'm not sure an open house on the same day as the hearing sort of.
So if I may, firstly, I think Mr. Tippett's characterization of this as a sort of a major rewrite is exactly what this committee supported when I thrust my arm in the air and volunteered for this, and that they didn't take a clean sheet of paper and start over, and I'm quite excited and pleased with the work that the group did with the marching orders they were given. One of the recommendations that I've discussed with staff is that while this may be a practice of having an open house and having a hearing on the same day, I'm going to recommend that there be an open house held in Honeymoon Bay from 9 to 11, that from Missachi Lake from noon till 2, and that in Lake Cowichan for the people more to the east, that be held from 1 till 3, or no, that's not right, noon till 2, 3 to 5, and then we'll break, and the groups will have had an opportunity to read and digest and consider, and then we'll come back for the public hearing in the evening. And I think that gives a fairly broad coverage. We'll make sure that this is out in the community well in advance so that people can direct questions and concerns they might have to staff. But as stated, this hasn't been a complete rewrite. This is more of a streamlined major edit of what was in place before. Go ahead.
So I guess my concern is that, you know, after 20 years, it may just be a rewrite, and maybe the community should have an opportunity to have their comments taken into account and maybe there should be changes. I mean, I think this process assumes that nothing will change. If someone brings up an issue that really is important that wasn't addressed, I mean, I don't find it very respectful of the community.
Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. This scenario is pretty common, quite frankly, for smaller communities. If this provides any assurance, this is not a closed-end situation. Quite frankly, if there are substantive issues that come forward at the public hearings, staff should be taking that back and making whatever changes necessary to reflect that, or at least accounting for those for consideration by the committee. And then if they, again, are substantive, there's the ability to have another public hearing. And in fact, there's no limit to the number of public hearings that you can have practically. I just want to assure you that is not the formal, open house community consultation tool, but nonetheless can be utilized for that same purpose.
And I'll go to Director Davis, and I just want to let everyone know we'll add Director Kuhn to the list of delegated directors for this as well. So Director Davis.
Thank you. Just listening to Mr. Blackwell's comments, he said that after this goes to public hearing, it would come back to the committee, not go straight to the board as most public hearings do.
Mr. Blackwell.
I would defer to Ms. Harrison in terms of how the logistics work.
Oh, Mr. Tippett.
I think I can get that one. Yeah, the mechanism would be if we go to, we go to open houses, and we may or may not hear at open houses that there's an issue or problem, and it's a major one. It involves land use or density. And then staff would come back and talk it over and decide whether it's such a major thing that it really ought to go back to committee. And it certainly can happen, which means the bylaw doesn't get third reading. The hearing has happened, but we're not proposing third reading. We go back and make changes and then run it through the process again. It's only slightly more cumbersome than the alternative, which is to have a number of public meetings beforehand, days later or weeks or earlier, I should say. We're maybe a bit optimistic that there won't be a lot of negative comment about this, but you never know. I mean, it could happen. But that's how it would happen. The hearing would occur, and staff would recommend that it not get third reading and it go back to committee.
Thank you. I've got, does that conclude your remarks? Director Marcotte?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would concur with the idea of the open house being held the same day as the public hearing. I have had that happen in my area, and it worked out very well for the most part, but there was some of it that didn't work out quite 100%, but I found that it was, people remembered what was going on at the open house and got to the point when the public hearing and their input was in place then. So I'm perfectly comfortable looking at an open house being held the same day.
Thank you. Director Nicholson, you have an additional question or comment?
Yes, I do. I'm wondering when the zoning bylaw will be, how's that going to work out with the harmonization project? And I'm particularly interested in the Area F part of the Couch and Cook Silo that has a different zoning bylaw. And how is all this going to be resolved?
Mr. Tippett?
Mr. Chair, I'm not 100% sure myself. I think the original hope or intent was that we were going to be bringing to committee the draft zoning bylaw and the OCP at the same time. It didn't work out that way. Essentially what happened is Heather left, and I wasn't able to resume work on the file until December last year, and didn't have time, frankly, to get to the zoning. I need to discuss that with Coralie and with Ross and others to decide how we're going to try and implement the zoning here, whether we'll just roll it into the bigger one or move sooner. And it depends also, if this plan is adopted, on doing a detailed analysis of the degree of non-synchronicity between the current zoning and this proposed plan. I expect that there's not a lot of problems there, so maybe leaving the current zoning in place for a while, it won't be a problem. There are other plans where that has been a problem, so we need to do a bit more analysis on that, but my gut feeling is it's not a major problem if we have to wait 6 or 8 months to get that updated.
Thank you. Any further questions? Director Nicholson.
Yeah, I have one more question. How is it you decide which directors get delegated?
Mr. Chair, what we used to do is we would go for adjacent ones, and then some directors who were from areas that didn't have a lot of development adjacent to them or near them said, hey, can I go to a hearing? So what did I say here? F, H, and A. Yeah, I don't know.
That was a bit of a strange one to me.
I did not mean to insult Director Kuhn. I know he's a very good director and he's a neighbor of the electoral area, but yeah, I think the idea was south, north, and the area F, but I as well is good.
And one of the, just to add, one of the practices has been that the director for the area, a neighboring director, and a director that wasn't necessarily right in the general geographical area, so that there was a little bit of diversity in the who was hearing the public. So with that, I think we'll add Director Kuhn to this resolution, and you've all got it in front of you. Mr. Blackwell, would you, oh, did we have a mover and seconder? Yes, we did. Mr. Blackwell, would you read the recommendation, please? You don't have it.
It's on the screen.
It's on the screen.
Mr. Chair, you wanted to change it with respect to open houses? Okay, thank you.
It's just no area, it's just, no. It's public open house same day, yep. Open houses, yes.
Thank you. So the resolution before you is that one official community plan bylaw number 4210, applicable to electoral area F, Couch and Lake, Scotts Falls, be forwarded to the board for consideration of first and second readings. 2, that the referral set out in the May 16th, 2018 Electoral Area Services Committee staff report dated April 26th, 2018 be accepted. And 3, that open houses be held the same day as the scheduled public hearing with directors for electoral areas F, I, H, and A delegated to attend the hearing.
Resolution's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion carries. Excellent. Thank you very much. Move back to R6. Ms. Rondeau, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll reorder the slides, hopefully. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Before you, you have a development permit application for a new BC Transit maintenance or facility, including a maintenance building, office admin, a combined fuel bay, and bus wash facility. The location of the property is 5271 Bowl Road, and it's located within the Coxsila Development Permit Area, as well as the riparian areas regulation development permit area. The zoning for the property is I1, light industrial, and that's consistent with a lot of the other light industrial uses towards the east. It's near on the south and the west sides to properties that are zoned residential or comprehensive development. The RM2 zoned property there is currently vacant, but RM2 allows for a multifamily use. Here are some site photos taken from a site visit the end of last year, I believe. You're looking on the left-hand side slide, you're looking at some of the industrial buildings located north of Bowl Road. The Coxsila Development Permit Area specifies guidelines related to environmental protection, riparian protection for watercourses, enhancement opportunities, lighting, building, form, and character. As well as stormwater management. Here are some additional photos of the site as it existed. The one on the left is looking south along the western property line. And the applicants have supplied information in support of their application that complies, in staff's opinion, with the guidelines of the Coxsila the Coxsila Development Permit Area. We've sent out letters to adjacent property owners within 60 meters advising them of the variance requests for the setback to watercourses. There are watercourses located on every side of the property. And to date, we've received a few responses. I believe there are 3 within the agenda package. One of the response letters includes additional signatures who are also residents of the property adjacent. The slide on the photo on the left is the Bull Road intersection with Polkey Road, and the slide on the right is looking north. That's the a photo of Polkey Road Ditch, Busy Place Creek, Schwexela Creek. There's been a lot of work done in that area on restoration within Busy Place Creek, within the lower reaches. This, in my understanding, is on the sort of upper reaches of the creek. The application was presented to the Advisory Planning Commission, who made requested additional information, and I made mention in the report of some of the areas that staff were able to research and include information on prior to the agenda deadline. And I have researched other items, and I do intend to get back to them on. But you'll see in the staff report some of the concerns presented and how these have either been addressed by the applicant or where they're applicable and relevant to the development permit area guidelines. The staff recommendation is to approve the development permit application subject to some revisions on the lighting. Due to deadlines, we weren't able to get a revised lighting plan to share with the committee, but we're recommending specifically that more attention be considered for the south and west property lines, which are the residential adjacent property owners, minimizing light spill onto those properties. As well, there are some concerns around the glare from, in particular, the 15-meter poles, and we'd like to see the glare reduced in those areas. I've highlighted the variances that have been proposed, and also that moving forward, should the development permit be issued, that the general manager has the ability to permit minor revisions in accordance with the development permit area guidelines. Thank you.
I've got a speakers list. Questions for staff. Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Rochelle. So we had a few people from the public come today and express their concerns. And one of them was the noise from the buses, but I think personally electric is coming exponentially, and so that noise factor, and also with the waterways is also something where we'll see more and more electric happening exponentially. But they mentioned a alternative plan by using Boyles Road. And so has the plan actually gone to the public for public input of the design of the facility where they could give that kind of input? Has that already happened? Or are we too late in the process for that?
Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. So this is a development permit, and essentially the only process associated with development permits, which are set out in OCPs that are vetted by the community and endorsed by the board, is that they either comply or they don't comply. So if they comply, they must be issued. If they don't comply, then the specific provision, the specific guideline that is inconsistent with, the specific aspect of the proposal that is inconsistent with any given development permit guideline has to be articulated. So long as, with regard to access and so forth, this has been gone through the due process and satisfied the DP conditions, staff are obligated to recommend approval.
May I add
Do you
to
have a
that?
follow-up?
I would
Oh,
like to
go
add
ahead.
something. Thank you. So thank you, Ross. In regards to, because this is a BC Transit facility and it's a provincial entity, they've referred the application to other agencies. Now, I'm not sure they'll be able to speak to their level of public consultation, but they've had discussions with other agencies. And with regards to the electric buses, I'm sure they'll be able to state, and I've heard it already just through this process, that they're not anticipating moving to any electric buses.
Do you have a follow-up, Director
Yes, please.
Acton?
Yes, please. Well, I understand the development permit process. I guess it's more of a question for BC Transit then. Do they take their design out to the public, since it is provincially funded, and you know, we do partner with the community? So do they take their design and say, okay, this is how an architect has designed it? Do we like it? Do we, in that process, outside of meeting the requirements?
Director Acton, can you hold that question until we get the applicants up? And I'd go to other directors if they have questions for staff. Director Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess none of my questions are really related to the development permit aspect of this, so I will pass.
Thank you. Any further questions for staff on the development permit? Seeing none, I think we have a question for the applicants. So who would like to come up and take Director Acton's question? Director Acton, would you repeat your question?
I was curious because members that are concerned who live close to the facility had a suggestion of different entrance and that it would work better. Do you go out with your plans to the community and kind of take any public input and consider that with your architect and design team?
My name is Tyson Lorth, by the way, project manager at BC Transit. We went through several different concepts at the beginning of this. We did look at coming off Polkey Road, which has been expressed by the residents. We reached out to the Ministry of Transportation and looked at it, and they have no problems with us using the Bowl Road entrances that are already there existing. And after going through multiple concepts, looking at safety within the site and access points, referencing where the building is placed, the concept that we presented today was the best concept put forward. So in terms of answering your question, no, we didn't go out to the public, but we did reach out to Ministry of Transportation as well as use our architect's judgment and going along with the guidelines for the concept that we presented.
Director Davis.
Thank you. And looking at the site plan, is the idea to drive the buses up Polkey Road and go in using the west entrance and then exit through the east entrance right near Polkey, or do you?
Yeah. So in terms of the concept and our operation, ins and outs will be mainly done through the entrance. I guess it would be to the east, so further in to Bowl Road.
West.
West. Sorry. Yeah. West. Sorry. That'll be the ins and outs. BC Transit's operation philosophy is we always have a secondary exit in case there's an issue with something that happens and we can't get the buses out of that main entrance. So the secondary exit will mostly be used for deliveries exiting. But yes, the main point of in and out will be on the west side. And it's a bigger, if you'll see the plans when they come around, it's a bigger entrance compared to where the one east is just a simple gate that's going to swing and close and just big enough for a bus to exit out of.
Thank you.
Seeing no further hands, do we have a mover and seconder for the recommended resolution? Moved by Director Yanni Donardo, seconded by Director Davis. Mr. Blackwell, would you read the recommended resolution, please?
The recommendation before you is several parts. One, that it be recommended to the board that development permit application with variance, application number 10-E-17DP, located at 5271 Bowl Road, be approved and issued following receipt of information confirming that light spill onto adjacent residential properties is at approximately 0 lux at the south and west property lines, and that glare has been minimized. 2, that section 5.18 of zoning bylaw number 1840 be varied as follows. 1, the setback from watercourse A, Busy Place Creek, Polkey Road ditch is reduced from 29.16 meters to 15.3 meters for the driveway and parking areas, and 24.8 meters for the main building. 2, the setback from watercourse B1, Bull Road ditch, is reduced from 23.55 meters to 9 meters. 3, the setback from watercourse B2 along the west property line is reduced from 20 meters to 6.8 meters for the concrete slab fuel tank, and 9.5 meters for the fuel bay, wash bay building. And 4, the setback from watercourse C south is reduced from 20 meters to 2 meters for the future parking area and site development. And then 3, that the general manager of land use services be authorized to permit minor revisions to the permit in accordance with the intent of development permit guidelines of OCP bylaw number 1490.
Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I think I went to the ceremony last summer. It was really hot when we had the chair of the CVRD and Chief Seymour pleased about this transit facility and on this particular site, and I think it was pretty clear that one of the things that we were hoping was that this would become a good example of, sort of the best example of a fish-friendly type of a development in what is sort of a industrial business park next to residential. And I would say that this has been a really difficult application, because what we're dealing with is a development permit. And you know as well as I do, we have basically have no influence on development permits. But I think what I've learned, and I hope that the CVRD has learned in general about process, is that we could have done this a lot differently. We're basically the applicant in partnership with the transit people, and so this is as much our place as anything, and yet we didn't, and also the province really doesn't have to go along with our process anyway. They're just politely doing that. But we could have, I think if we'd worked a lot harder at the beginning to get together within our staff. I remember last meeting that we had an update from Tyson. I complimented Tyson on his ability to collaborate with our staff, and I was really pleased with that. But what I didn't really recognize is that we hadn't, as within the CVRD, come together to really understand what kind of opportunities there were to make this a really excellent development. So I am not, I think we're doing the basics on the development permit side. It really, I find it really disturbing that the neighborhood that are directly affected on Bull Road are not happy about the number of buses that are going to be using that very narrow road, and it is very narrow. And I have to agree with the back of our thing here. I mean, how is it possible to preserve the stream, add a pathway, widen the road, put trees, and still allow the businesses to do all that they're doing? And the bus, I'll be surprised to see it all work out. However, we don't have any control over that issue. So, so I also think the Advisory Planning Commission worked really hard to provide some good input, and I really appreciate their work, and I really appreciate the work that Rochelle has done to try and respond to their comments, and they did have some really good input. And one in particular is that car washes are not permitted in that Coxsila Industrial Park area, and yet we're having a bus wash, so that they were really concerned about the toxicity of stuff going into the sewage system. So as a result of that, it's all going to be be dealt with, which I think is a good thing. But there's lots, these things are really complicated, and I think the more eyes you have and the more that you can work together and work these issues out ahead of time, the better product you have. And I think this comes back again to that issue we had last meeting, which was that development permits, technical ones like this, won't be coming to APCs. And I think that's a mistake, because it's just another set of eyes that can help make a project that much better. But back to my original thing is I really hope next time when we have a project like this, which is just out of the norm, it's not a regular thing, it's when we're the applicant, we should really get it together on working together within the area, because this had parks interests, it has flooding interests, environmental interests, as well as the basic planning stuff. So I hope we can do that better next time.
Thank you, Director Kuhn.
I apologize. I should have asked that question earlier. I'm still a little bit troubled. How hard did we try to consider an entry from Polkey Road? Would it be such a big problem, or would it cost too much, or what is the problem? Because if looking at this map here, I could see the concerns about the neighboring residents. Yes, there'll be a lot of noise, and it looks to me like it might be unnecessary noise. We could avoid that, and I don't know how much or how many hoops we'd have to jump through to get that done. And I just want to put that on the table. Is there a possibility that we could do that from Polkey Road?
Thank you. So I'll let you know that, or as you probably do know, the Ministry of Transportation is the approving authority for road access, as well as anything to do with roads in the unincorporated areas. The 2 points of access are pretty well existing. In fact, there's 3 of them along Bull Road, and that road supported the former light industrial use as well as those access points. My correspondence with the Ministry of Transportation indicated that they're not concerned. They did issue a permit for the Bull Road entrance exit as well as the emergency exit. The applicant, Tyson, indicated that they did their own evaluation and they came forward with the proposal, which is as you see it in terms of access points. And that's staff at the CVRD had no more involvement with directing where those points of access should occur. We received the site plan with that as a proposal. They had done their due diligence, and that's sort of the end of my level of involvement, except for trying to follow up and chase down answers in terms of the concerns that have arisen around the entrance points. And just as a note, because it wasn't really mentioned, the site is designed so that you enter the site and you sort of come on the site with your bus, assuming you're a bus. You drive through the bus wash and then you park. So the only reverse, which is a concern, for the beeping, the reverse beeping, the only reversing is during the day when buses are coming out of the maintenance buildings after they've received their maintenance. So the site has been designed to minimize the amount of reversing, mostly because of security and sort of safety, and you don't want to have buses backing up and crashing into things. But so those are my comments on the access. I highlighted in the report why Polkey Road is not a desirable entrance from the point of view of the applicants, and those were because the frontage is much more narrow. There's not as much frontage, and it's closer to Polkey Road and Bull Road intersection. Polkey Road is also much busier, and the creek there is the fish-bearing watercourse, the main one that's connected to Busy Place Creek. Bull Road Ditch is also connected, but it's not the creek itself, which is considered to be Polkey Road Ditch, Busy Place Creek.
Do you have a follow-up, Director Kuhn? Director Nicholson?
So there's one other issue that I just would like to raise, and it's related to the Busy Place Creek in the riparian area. So at the southeast corner is the entrance to Maplewood Park, which is that's that green area, and you can see it's quite narrow and comes to a point alongside the property. And there is a ditch that carries water down to Busy Place Creek on the south side of the property line. It is not currently fish-bearing because there's an old culvert in there that crosses the park that doesn't allow the fish up. And I think that the ideal thing is for that to be, the culvert to be removed and it to be just developed into a wetland to support better habitat for Busy Place Creek. I guess part of the issue with this, as I mentioned, was we didn't get together early enough to figure out how to take advantage of this development to make some improvements to Busy Place Creek. But I understand that there may be some there are contingency funds for this project, and I would like to ask BC Transit if we could be assured that if there are any contingency funds left, that could be put towards dealing with that issue. Lighting up that culvert area in the park. And I'm sure that we could find some parks money or gas tax money to contribute to it, but I think it would be a good project for that Busy Place Creek. So can I ask that question of BC Transit?
I think they've heard you, and I don't know that that question is within the scope of the development permit resolution that we have before us, but did I see some nodding from Tyson, please?
Okay, so then I'll make a motion after we finish with this one.
I would like to say, actually, I really appreciate all of Rochelle's hard work. I've tried not to bug her too much over the last couple months, so that's something I did want to acknowledge. In terms of the concerns around the culvert there, that was, I think, was shocking for everybody. No one knew it was there, so we've come across a surprise. I am all for looking at our contingency once we're into the project and seeing where we're at. Many of you know the funding around this project is quite unique, where it's federally, provincially, and through the CVRD. So I'm going to be working closely with Jim and his group, as well as I haven't had an opportunity, but through the local Area E committee, they had some people come in and speak, and I think there's some opportunity for us to potentially work with them once we get underway and just see the cost of the scope of the project. The first tender right now is on the street for bidding, so within the next 6 to 8 months we'll have a better idea of where we're at financially. But by all means, the money's there from the feds and the province, as well as yourself, so that if there's opportunities there, I'm more than happy to explore that. I will say that daylighting the culvert is not a cheap thing, so if there is any money, I believe that there's opportunity to enhance any part of that area and go from there. So yes, I look forward to working with everyone in that.
Okay. Thank you. So I think we can go to the question of propriety of entertaining a resolution on that, but I'm looking at the resolution that we have before us, and I'm going to call the question. Is everybody ready for the question? All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries. And I'm just looking to, I think they've heard what you've asked, and I don't know about the propriety of us passing a resolution that somehow encumbers their contingency. So are you prepared to allow that message that you've just shared with them to move forward and have them come back if there's opportunities? Because I don't know that we can actually entertain a resolution that is going to encumber their contingencies. Is that, I'm right about that? Yes. So, yeah, we're on committee as well. So I think they've heard you, and I would suggest you contact the transit people when they're done. Next item, R7. Ms. Soroka, thank you for being so patient.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My report is a follow-up to the report, and it's to do with the transit maintenance facility. So what I'm just going to be talking about is the actual trail connection that we're proposing, and we've been working and with transit on this. So we're looking at doing a pedestrian trail connection along Bowl Road that will connect south along Pokey Road and will actually connect to Maplewood Park, which is just to the southeast corner of the property. So the section along Bowl Road will actually be a permit to construct with the Ministry of Transportation. And the section of trail that will travel south along Pokey Road will actually be a statutory right-of-way that will get registered over the transit property, and it'll be in favor of the province. And then that will be able to connect to Maplewood Park. Now, the reason that we're actually looking for the stat right-of-way to go across the transit property is because there's not enough room on Pokey Road to actually get a proper roadside pathway in. So this will be our alternative connection. Now, one thing that we have found is that the applicant has actually offered to pay for the construction of the Bowl Road and the trail across the transit property. So that's great. In addition to the trails, as we were just talking about, there is a pipe or a culvert that goes across or underneath Maplewood Park, and it connects the southeast corner of the transit property. It's a drainage culvert, it goes under the park, and it deposits the water into the Pokey Road ditch. So what we're looking for is an unregistered easement across our park property, and that will be registered in favor of the province. And I just want to back up that the stat right-of-way that will be going across the transit property will be in favor of the CVRD. I had those two mixed up. So in conclusion, we're looking at 3 recommendations, and you have them before you. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
You're going to move the
I was just going to move
recommendation?
the recommendation, but I'll.
Any questions for staff? Move the recommendation, Director
Move the
Wynn.
Recommendation.
Seconded by Director Davis.
That was great work.
Mr. Blackwell, would you read the recommendation?
The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board, 1, that a 3-meter public trail statutory right-of-way be registered in favor of the regional district over the eastern portion of Lot 2, Plan VIP 20956 in the Cooks Island Business Park, owned by the province of British Columbia. 2, that a permit to construct agreement be approved with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to build and maintain a roadside pathway on the south side of Bull Road. And 3, that an unregistered easement between BC Transit and the CVRD for drainage across Maplewood, Maplewood Park from Lot 2, Plan VIP 20956 to Pokey Road be approved.
Seeing no hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Just before we move on the previous item, Director Nicholson had indicated a resolution, and I think we've had, would you please explain, Ms. Harrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If Director Nicholson would like to have a request on the public record with regards to BC Transit considering the contingency for the lighting, then she's free to do so. But nothing that this committee does can commit or bind BC Transit to do that.
It wasn't lighting though, it was daylighting of the culvert, correct? So would you like to make a resolution to that effect?
Maybe Mr. Blackwell would, for me.
The intent of the resolution is that, Tanya,
I do
go
have a
ahead.
copy of it here. I can read it out loud if you like. That any contingency remaining at the completion of the transit maintenance facility be considered for allocation towards pursuing options to daylight the drainage culvert across Maplewood Park.
Moved by Director Nicholson, seconded by Director Davis. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Those opposed? The motion carries. Next item. Could be R9. Let me pull up. R9 is Ms. Mrs. Thompson. Wow, Mr. Dennison has passed the torch. How exciting. The lectern is yours. The floor is yours. Press the mic button.
Thanks. Okay. Today I'm presenting for information on the Mill Bay Wastewater Integration Phase 1 project and the UBCM Strategic Priorities Fund grant. So just a project overview. The CVRD successfully was awarded approximately $5.9 million for this project through the Strategic Priorities Fund. The objectives of this project are to provide sustainable wastewater management for Mill Bay Village, allow for a centrally located Class A wastewater treatment facility, as well as the integration of small existing systems with issues meeting regulatory requirements. The proposed completion date for this project is June 30th, 2021. These are the criteria for the funding programs that the project had to meet, and we identified in the application for the funding how the project meets all these requirements, and that includes things including but not limited to allowing for the integration of failing systems. There's also a effluent reuse component in this project, as there's existing in the Twin Cedars system in Cobble Hill already. And providing servicing, which will encourage development to occur inside the Mill Bay urban containment boundary as per the OCP. So kind of our first priority for this project is existing CVRD wastewater systems in Mill Bay, which there are 4. We came up with this flow chart for assessing those 4 existing CVRD systems and identifying which of those would be suitable for integration into the new wastewater treatment facility. In this flow chart, you can see that we assess things like whether the system is meeting regulatory requirements, the physical location, technical and financial status of the system, and whether the solution for the system would provide a sustainable system, and finally, whether the proposed solution would be in line with CVRD's long-term objectives. We came up with this kind of initial proposed system map here. So this has just been discussed internally so far, and we're just getting started. So this is just kind of our first take at how things are going to look. You can see there's a number of different groups that might be interested in this project. So we've identified some of the existing systems, properties, new developments in the Mill Bay urban containment boundary, and they'll all be consulted as part of this project. And we're calling them currently potential partners for the new wastewater treatment facility. So just zooming in a little bit on that map, we've got a proposed layout here. Existing infrastructure is shown in green in the Mill Springs existing system, Brulette and Cary Village, and as well as Sentinel Ridge on the east side. So important components here in the project are the wastewater treatment facility, as you can see in the Stonebridge area, as well as the disposal site, and a few mains that will provide the start of a network for the system for Mill Bay. So next steps for the project are initial meetings with the potential partners. So that's the list of partners that we had identified. Preliminary assessment, design, and cost estimates once we've had that kind of conversation with everyone and found out who is interested in joining the wastewater treatment facility. The preliminary assessment will include background information from the first stage of the South Sector Liquid Waste Management Plan that is currently underway by the Environmental Division. So work they've already completed for that we can make use of for this project includes population analysis, environmental mapping, and system assessments. Once we've kind of had some iteration with the potential partners and preliminary assessment and cost, and finding out the partners that are likely to be, want to be included in the project, we would come back for a board resolution, and that would be to determine how to best use the funding for the community. Once that's in place, we would finalize partner buy-in and continue to detailed design and construction. And that's kind of the plan for this project. Is there any questions?
Of course there is. Director Davis.
Thank you for the presentation, and
You're welcome.
thank you to staff for writing the grant application that got this, and for the board for sending it along to the federal government. So looking at your flow chart, it looks to me as though initially you're going to try to get 3 of the 4 wastewater plants together, depending on partners.
Yeah, so initially for the existing CVRD systems, yeah, so initially through the flow, we identified Brulette Place in the north and Cary Village in the west as being suitable for integration into the new wastewater treatment facility. There's also Sentinel Ridge on the east. There's a small portion there just on the water, the Mill Bay Marina. That's actually part of Sentinel Ridge. In this proposed plan, we have Sentinel Ridge, the pump station, being included in the treatment facility because the force main from Sentinel Ridge on the east side can be better utilized in the new system versus existing. The force main is going the opposite direction, and the high pressure that comes from the pump station at the Mill Bay Marina, it's not currently usable to tie in because of the high pressures there. So reversing that would allow people on the east side to tie into that force main if the flow is reversed.
Director Davis, follow up.
So I guess what most people don't know is that the pump station down by the marina pumps up to Sentinel Ridge, and
Yes.
you're proposing to reverse that. So have it come from Sentinel Ridge down there and then pump across the highway? Or-
Having the pump station from Mill Bay Marina there pump across the highway, yeah, and existing homes, if they choose, on the east side can tie into that existing main by way of step system because there would be no pressure in there. Right now it goes from high pressure from Mill Bay Marina up to Sentinel Ridge, which is south of this map.
Yeah, there were a number of people along that route, me included, who were disappointed that it wasn't able to be connected to the first way, and I'm glad that this is likely to happen now, so thank you.
Yeah, and like I say, this is kind of our initial idea internally of what it might look like, but we'll have to work out costs and partners, and that will all change multiple times, I'm sure.
Director Nicholson.
When you say partners, like, who would be possible partners? All the different system owners?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So our potential partners that we've identified here are listed here, and That includes existing CVRD systems, existing private stratas and residential systems, private residential individuals, existing commercial, so, you know, Brentwood College, the Mill Bay Mall, all those properties that are located in and around the Mill Bay Village, and then as well as new developments. So the proposed Stonebridge development, there is a fairly large component of this project because the proposed treatment plant site is located on their land, or Stonebridge land that they would be providing to the CVRD for their development.
Thank you very much. Great job. Appreciate the information.
Great, thanks.
Next item. R10. I thought we were getting Louise for this one.
Oh, yeah,
Mr. Hatem.
Chair, this is the last, I believe, report, and it's the best one. So, this report, now staff are requesting approval for a budget amendment to function 575, and that's for engineering services. So the reason for this amendment is that we have, you know, an old Jeep, old vehicle, is at the end of its kind of life, and we experienced lots of high-cost maintenance, and currently the vehicle is not safe to drive. So anytime that our staff actually take it out, come back with more problems. So we are planning to replace the vehicle with an electric option or electric one, and we want to take advantage of some of the existing grant programs. So in that function 575, currently there is actually $13,641 in capital reserve and $104,840 in operating reserves, and that's what we are going to use. And again, in that function, there is a line item for the old Jeep. So basically, we are not creating a new line item. Basically, we want to have this amendment, and we're going to look at other options that we have, maybe before the end of the year or next year, based on the availability of some grant applications, we're going to actually replace it.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Director Davis.
Just don't know if you'd be, if Tesla Model 3s would be available yet, if that's what you're going for.
I don't know.
I think I found an arithmetic problem in an engineering report. It says it was a 96 Jeep, and that makes it 18 years old, although by my calculations that's 22.
Which one? Which?
In the background, on the front page.
So you win the prize. Would you like to move the recommended resolution?
I will do that.
Is there a seconder? Seconders all around. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion carries. Excellent. R12, Director Yanni Donardo. Is this going to be a couple of minutes? Okay. R12. Yes.
We've been discussing here today about enforcement, ticketing, that type of stuff, and also just here today about our official community plans and what our community had said or stated about our official community plans. And today was one example that came from the official community plan, so it needs to go back to community to speak to it. And also this is one where there is, in our official community plan, there was view corridors were to be remain open. So I know that I've discussed that here with you, but I wanted to share with you, it's a tough haul and it's tough for enforcement as well, and also for people around this table to stick to what the community has said. So this is one of our, pretty much one of the very few view corridors that was slowly being taken over by development without permits. And I wanted to share with you, this is one. This, I believe, was a hot dog stand. It's now been removed. So I'd like to thank staff for all the hard work on there. So you can see the hot dog stand and what it is blocking. And then I think you can see the hot dog stand that is removed. So you see the view corridor once again. It's very obvious. And at the same time, the hot dog stand, there was a real estate office that was also built without permits. And that was something that we had to stick to and make sure that it was removed. And I thank this board for honoring the OCP and what the community has asked for. So with this, it's become, out of our implementation from our charrette, which is things that we can do now, this view corridor has become a portal. So with that, I can share what I experienced yesterday in the little video clip of what a portal and just a little bit of money and the community's enthusiasm to move forward to.
Gotta put Bruce's basket in there too.
I believe that was already removed. No, that could be already removed, I'm not sure. But there was people parking down there, so they needed to put up some type of, oh, you gotta go to the beginning here. Anyway. I was down there yesterday.
Gotta put Bruce's basket in there too. Nice baskets. Beautification of Couch and Bay. This is another portal. Way to go, Bruce.
So anyway, that's just a little taste of, that was just yesterday with community themselves. And so, you know, when we talk about sticking to what our community has told us what they want, I think this is a perfect example of the stick-to-itiveness of making sure that we honor that. So I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Annie DiNardo. Good job. Next item. Is there any unfinished business, Mr. Blackwell?
There is no unfinished business.
And is there any new business?
There's no new business.
That brings us to question period. Are there any members of the public that would like to pose a question to the committee or to the chair at this time? Well, I'll tell you what question period is. The purpose of question period is to provide public access to the board, committee, commission regarding the business of local government. The purpose of question period procedure policy is to recognize the need for question period to proceed in a timely fashion. We do have a closed session following this. Question period is subject to the following provisions. We allot a maximum of 15 minutes for question. The question period is comprised of two parts. The first part is reserved for questions directly related to business discussed during the meeting. If there's time remaining, questions during the second part can be of a matter of public interest under the jurisdiction of the regional district. You'll be allowed to ask one question with a follow-up question related to the answer. After all the questions have been heard and there's still time remaining, the questioner who has already spoken can get up and ask an additional question. Questions must truly be questions and not statements of opinion. Questioners are not permitted to make a speech, and we ask you to refer to or avoid personal references, insinuations, violent or disrespectful remarks, and they shall be addressed to me, the chair. So if you have any questions, please come up to the microphone. Press the button.
Well, I guess my question, you know my concerns, and it sounds like with the discussion surrounding development permit that there really isn't another opportunity for input from myself or other concerned parties to try to make some alterations to the Bull Road versus the Polkey Road thing. So my question is there another opportunity for me to have some effect on this thing going forward?
I believe your assumption and your question is correct, that the opportunity for public input, I suppose if you were so inclined, you could apply for a delegation to attend the board, but this committee has made its decision around the development permit, and that will be going forward at the May 23rd meeting.
Which board is that? I mean,
CVRD Board of Directors.
okay.
Now,
Okay.
keeping in mind that it will be the same members of this committee voting on the development permit,
Just different hats, kind of thing? Something?
same hats,
Kind of thing?
different committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Would anyone else like to pose a question to the board or committee? To the chair.
Mr. Chair, good afternoon. My first question, is there any hand sanitizer available at the podium? Because unfortunately, Mr. Tippett was very ill and his hands all over everything, and all your staff members now have touched the same thing. That's why I used my pen. So a little tongue-in-cheek, but maybe something to think about while we're still experiencing the flu. The speaker before me asked about the ability for the public to comment. And the BC Transit delegation request, you know myself that I'm very big proponent of the public being able to have input. When an issue like this or an application like this comes forward, the agenda is released on the Friday. The meeting happens on the Wednesday. How is the public able to comment or make a request for a delegation to appear before the board when there's not the time frame allowed for that?
I don't know that, so your question is, how can they appear as a delegation for a development permit?
For any application, yes.
Well, for other applications, there will be agendas published at committee, and there's also other public processes for rezonings and for OCP amendments where there is a public opportunity. The public opportunity for comments on development permits occurs, as Mr. Blackwell had said, when the approval of the guidelines for the development permits happen. So there is no consideration for public input on development permits.
So the public does not have an opportunity to speak. But at this point, the group asked for a delegation request, but were denied. And was that denial based solely on that criteria?
You would have to ask the individual directors after offline.
Thank you. A bus wash is included in the BC Transit application. It's not listed as a permitted use under I-1 and 11.1 of the Area E zoning bylaw 1840. Would that not require a rezoning request or an OCP amendment?
No.
I'm sorry?
No, it's an ancillary use to a principal use, and this isn't a car wash, it's a bus wash. So.
Thank you.
My understanding permitted under the zoning.
Thank you. My second, or my final question is related to R8. When I asked at the last EASC meeting, we had a discussion about the form and function of the APCs, and I believe you said to me that the APCs were not representative of the public.
I don't believe I said that. I said they don't represent the public. They are a representative sample of the public.
Okay, so they don't represent the public. So the Area F APC, what we heard from Mr. Tippett was there was no public consultation throughout the process because it was considered to be an edit and not a rewrite.
This was a streamlined review and edit of the OCP. It wasn't a complete OCP project start to finish, no.
What are the rules around the public consultation for that. It seems to me a little bit strange that this is an opportunity. We know that OCPs are long and far between when they're reviewed, and the public does not seem to have had the ability to be consulted or to make requests for inclusion in the OCP through the lack of consultation.
Kind of a loaded question. We'll be going out to consult with the public at the open houses.
Which is in one day, and those people that work will not be able to attend. So there's no, I'll leave it at that. Thank you. The other thing that with that is Area F is part of Area F is covered under the Area E OCP, and the zoning bylaw rests with the Area F for that portion of Area E, or sorry, it's kind of complicated. The portion of Area F that's covered under the Area E OCP is governed by the Area F zoning bylaw. One of the purposes of the rewrites of the Area E and F OCP was to provide some harmonization there. We're not seeing that. But what I'm really at a loss to understand is why the Area E director was not delegated to attend the public hearing, as she represents people that live within Area F.
Excuse me? She represents people that live within Area F?
As far as our Area E OCP is, because a portion of Area F is covered under the Area E OCP, and as such, Director Nicholson is the representative.
She can certainly attend the OCP or the public hearing if she's so inclined, and I heard no request for her to attend as Director Kuhn had done. So if she was inclined to be in attendance, she can certainly be there.
I think I did hear a request, but it was not picked up on. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions from the public? It's not on.
Mr. Chair, I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. Mr. Chair, today I've heard several concerned citizens voicing their concerns about no public input. When I've been on some major projects for the CBRD, social impact on citing major development was a very, very important part of it. And even though the OCP and the zoning bylaws let a project go in, if it's a major project, do you not think that social impact should be taken into consideration, even though the applicant has the right to do things, but to do the right thing, is that not the best way to go?
Well, I'm not sure what your definition of social impact is, but we just heard a very passionate plea from someone that was very concerned because their certainty under zoning was taken away, and we're attempting to make them whole. And I think that's Director Kuhn had even made mention of the fact that certainty is important, and if we're suggesting that if we zone, but there's a caveat that you have to go out and get social license for something that's pre-zoned, I think we will have a worse scenario for investment in this region if people can't count on the certainty of what zoning provides.
Mr. Chair, if we don't, social impact is of course how it affects the community for school children crossing the roads, or noise, dust, any other things that could inconvenience people or affect their safety. Should that not be taken into consideration? And even though the applicant does have the right to do this, to put in a certain industry, that social impact should really be looked at, should it not?
Well, I don't know of any provision under the Local Government Act that requires a social impact, and the areas of safety on the road is an area that's not of our jurisdiction. It's the Provincial Government Ministry of Highways, and they've been issued a permit for their for that operation.
When we were studying the Eco Depot, social impact was a very major thing in that, and I think it should be in any major project, that it would only be polite to go out and talk to your neighbors and get their opinions to have a harmonious project rather than people be dissatisfied with it. We can't satisfy everyone, but do you not think that it should be taken into consideration, Mr. Chair?
Well, I think the applicant has done what they can within their timelines and their funding guidelines to take into account what they could take into account, and they've received the approval of this committee that goes forward to the board saying that they should move forward. That's all I can answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else have any questions? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is a closed session. Can I have a resolution to move into closed session? Moved and seconded. Call the question. All in favor? The opposed? Carried. Take a quick break and we'll reconvene.